Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Storm clouds churn in a blood-red sky when she staggers home at midnight, reeking of cheap liquor and a stranger's touch. Her eyes won't meet mine, guilt etched in every glance. A single phone call changed our future forever, and my heart thunders with rage. Our children deserve the truth, yet she begs for silence. Betrayal rips through my soul, a blazing inferno of doubt and loss. In one breath, she destroyed our vows, our laughter, our very home. No warning, no apology, only smirks and whispered confessions. Friends murmur condolences, unaware how deep her dagger cuts. Every promise she made turns to ashes. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I remember that afternoon clearly. It was a Wednesday, sometime early spring, chilly enough that a lazy wind rattled the back porch screen, but not so cold that you needed more than a light jacket. I was 12 years old, trudging along the street as I headed home from my friend Kyle's house. I'd spent the day playing video games, losing track of time, which is exactly what a kid is supposed to do. But the moment I reached our driveway, something felt off. It was the kind of feeling you get when the sky goes dark before a thunderstorm, even if you can't see a single cloud. Our place was a small, single-story home with faded blue paint. Dad had promised to repaint it that summer, though I guess we all suspected he never really had enough time or energy for that. Yet he was the type of guy who made 1,000 promises just because he wanted everyone around him happy. I loved that about him. Anyway, I opened the front door and was greeted by eerie silence. Usually, Dad had the TV on low, or Lane, my little brother, would be rummaging for after-school snacks. But that day, quiet hovered in every corner of the house. I dropped my backpack on the linoleum floor and ventured deeper inside, searching for clues. I found Dad hunched at the kitchen table. He had a handful of bills spread out, plus his phone face down, as if he was trying to avoid reading any new messages. His hair, dark brown like mine, seemed more disheveled than usual. He didn't even look up when I entered. "Hey, Dad," I said carefully. "Is everything okay?" He managed a half-smile, rubbing a hand across his chin. "Welcome back, kiddo." There was a pause, one that felt almost too heavy for the room. "Your mom's in the bedroom. She's been on the phone a lot." He didn't say more, but I heard the quiet tension in his words. I glanced past him into the hallway. The door to my parents' bedroom was nearly shut, but a sliver of light cut across the carpet. I could see my mother's silhouette pacing inside. Her voice was low, yet urgent, the kind you get when you're telling secrets. Something about the hush in her tone made my stomach clench. I dropped onto a chair across from Dad. We sat like that for a minute in near silence. I wanted to pepper him with questions, but I could sense this wasn't the moment to push. Dad looked exhausted. The skin under his eyes was shadowed, and his shoulders were tense in a way I'd never noticed before. Eventually, the bedroom door opened. Mom stepped out, phone clutched tight in her hand. She wore jeans and a t-shirt, nothing unusual. But I noticed her hair was brushed extra neat, her makeup done as if she was going somewhere special, even though it was nearly dinner time. She froze when she spotted me watching her, and for just a second, I caught this flicker in her eyes like she was startled, maybe even guilty. "Davis," she said, forcing a smile. "I didn't know you were home." Her gaze flicked to Dad for a brief second, then back to me. "Everything okay? You look worried?" I shrugged. "Everything's fine. I was with Kyle. I just got in." She gave a slow nod. "Right," she said quietly. "Dinner might be late tonight. I have some things I need to handle." Dad's jaw tightened. He fiddled with the envelopes in front of him, random bills that wouldn't get paid on time if we were unlucky. A near-silent standoff seemed to be happening between my parents, some conversation I wasn't privy to. Tension crackled in the air. Just then, my little brother Lane peeked around the corner. He was 8, wearing pajamas and hugging a stuffed shark he'd named Nemo. "Mom, you promised mac and cheese," he said. Normally, Lane was all bright eyes and laughter, but tonight he looked uncertain. Clearly, even an 80-year-old could feel the vibe in the house. Mom exhaled, stepping forward to pat Lane's head. I'll make it in a bit, sweetie, I promise. Just let me finish something first. Lane nodded solemnly, as if that was enough for him. He drifted off to the living room to turn on cartoons. Meanwhile, I glanced at Dad. He kept rifling through the envelopes, but I could tell he wasn't reading a word. Finally, Mom walked back to their bedroom, phone in hand again, the door clicking shut behind her. That faint hush of her voice returned as soon as it closed. Dad cleared his throat. Bud, could you help Sharon and Mary with chores? I think they're in the backyard, messing around instead of finishing up. I nodded but paused before getting up. Dad, are you sure everything's all right? He hesitated, searching my face. We'll talk later. For now, don't worry about it, okay? Just keep an eye on Lane and your sisters. There was a sadness in his tone that made my heart pound. I didn't want to pry further, so I left him alone, stepping outside to look for Mary and Sharon. As I crossed the threshold, I couldn't shake the feeling that something huge was about to happen, something that would break our routine forever. Out in the backyard, Mary and Sharon were by the old shed. The sky was tinted orange from the setting sun, making everything look oddly cinematic. Mary, who was only a year younger than me, had a rebellious streak that showed in her posture. Sharon, a couple of years older, had that temporary mother vibe whenever she saw Mary slacking off. Sharon spotted me first, frowning. You look worried, Davy. Dad's okay? I shrugged, trying to hide the dread twisting inside me. He seems stressed. Mom's acting weird. Mary snorted. Mom's always weird these days. That was true. For the past few months, she'd been different. More phone calls at odd hours, more excuses to leave the house. Dad once gently teased her about being addicted to her phone, but she'd bristled and asked him to mind his own business. Since then, tension had been a near-constant presence. Sharon set aside her rake. Let's just finish tidying up. Dad asked for help. She didn't push for details, but I saw the question in her eyes. She was worried, too. I joined them, collecting stray branches from the lawn. The entire time I fought the urge to run inside, fling the bedroom door open, and figure out who Mom was talking to so quietly, so secretively. But Dad's last words echoed in my mind. Don't worry about it. Just keep an eye on your siblings. We wrapped up chores as dusk settled in. Then we trailed inside, where we found Lane still in the living room, cuddled up with his stuffed shark, watching cartoons he didn't seem to be enjoying. Dad had left the kitchen. The hallway light was on, but the bedroom door was still closed. Mary suddenly looked uneasy. Do we just wait for dinner? Sharon pursed her lips. I guess so. Let's reheat leftover pasta for Lane. He's probably starving. That's how the evening went quietly, awkwardly, steeped in a sense of dread none of us could name. We'd had tense nights before money problems, some arguments here and there, but this was different. There was a hush that felt darker, heavier, as though it was swallowing us up. Even Mary, who usually flared with teenage anger, was subdued. Late that night, I heard Mom and Dad arguing behind their locked bedroom door. Their voices were too muffled for me to make out every word, but from the tone, I caught fear in Dad's voice and defiance in Mom's. I heard a name repeated that I couldn't quite catch, someone who was clearly important enough to cause a rift between my parents. Someone who had no business stepping into our lives. I pressed my ear to the wall, my heart pounding so loud I worried they'd hear. I caught Mom saying, I told you this is none of your business. Then Dad responded with something about betrayal, about not lying anymore, about how he refused to keep quiet. I froze, chills crawling down my spine. The entire moment felt both surreal and horrifyingly real. That night, I slept restlessly, wondering who she'd been talking to and what the word betrayal really meant for our family. Little did I know, I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to witness our whole world come crashing down, and all I could do was hold on and pray we'd survive the fall. I woke up the next morning with a nagging sense that everything had shifted while I slept. The sun through my bedroom curtains felt too bright, the neighborhood strangely quiet. Usually, Dad would be in the kitchen, frying eggs or pouring cereal for Lane. But as I stumbled to the hallway, I heard nothing but the hum of the furnace kicking on. My sisters were still asleep. Lane's door was slightly open, revealing him sprawled across his mattress. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, half expecting to see Dad there, flipping through the newspaper. Instead, I found him at the table with bloodshot eyes, phone in his hand. He looked up as I entered, and I saw heartbreak in the lines etched into his face. He forced a shaky grin. "Morning, bud. Didn't mean to startle you." I slid into a chair across from him. "Dad, why are you up so early?" He sighed, setting the phone aside. "Couldn't sleep. Your mom never came home last night." My gut twisted. She didn't come home at all. She left around midnight, told me she was going for a drive to clear her head. I guess she never returned. The confession hung in the air, thick with tension. A million questions churned in my mind, but I only managed one. "Are you okay?" Dad inhaled slowly, as if to calm himself. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "There's a lot going on that you kids shouldn't have to worry about, but I can't keep you shielded from it all anymore." Just then, we heard the front door open. Mom walked in, hair disheveled, eyes puffy, like she'd either been crying or not sleeping. She froze when she saw me in the kitchen, then fixed her gaze on Dad. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Alone." Dad glanced at me, nodding. "Okay." He stood up, gesturing for me to give them space. I drifted toward the living room, but still kept within earshot. While I couldn't see them, I heard the low murmur of their voices. Then came the raised tension, the argument. Mom kept saying, "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," while Dad insisted, "I'm your husband, and you lied to me. This is not some small misunderstanding." A wave of panic surged through me. Husband, wife, betrayal. My chest felt tight. Abruptly, Dad's voice escalated. "God, how could you do this?" He sounded near tears. "After everything I worked 2 jobs, I tried so hard to keep this family afloat." Mom cut him off, voice trembling. "Stop acting like I set out to hurt you. This just happened. You think I'm proud? You think I wanted this?" There was a long pause, and I could almost feel Dad's heartbreak pulsing through the walls. Eventually, he whispered, "But you chose it anyway." I inched closer to the hallway, my breath shallow. Without warning, Mom's phone started ringing. She cursed under her breath. Dad demanded to see who was calling. Mom refused. The ring continued, shrill and relentless, until she finally answered it, stepping away from Dad. I couldn't catch the words, but her tone was defensive, urgent. Then Dad's voice boomed. "You're still talking to him, aren't you?" Mom hissed. "Keep your voice down, for God's sake. You'll wake the kids." At that, Dad's anger seemed to snap into something else, maybe a desperation that consumed him. He started shouting about respect, about how he'd ignored the signs for too long. I heard the word revenge tumble out of his mouth, though I couldn't piece together the context. Revenge on whom? Her lover? The man who intruded into our lives? My heart pounded. This was so unlike Dad. He was usually calm, gentle, the one who'd ruffle our hair and murmur reassuring words about how everything would be okay. Now, hearing him talk about revenge, about betrayal, it was like my safe world had cracked. Mom snapped back, "You're being dramatic. This doesn't have to end in chaos. It's just let me figure out what I want. Don't force my hand." Silence. Then I heard a strangled noise from Dad, like a sob or a gasp. Something heavy fell to the floor. Alarmed, I rushed down the hallway and peered inside the kitchen. Dad was on his knees, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. "Oh my God!" Mom cried. She dropped her phone and crouched beside him, shaking. "Honey? Honey!" I bolted closer, my mind spinning. Dad's eyes were wide and his breathing was ragged. He tried to speak, but managed only a soft, garbled moan. My mother, tears flooding her cheeks, turned to me. "Call 911, Davis, now!" My fingers fumbled for the phone. I dialed with sweaty hands, hardly registering the operator's questions. "My dad, he's collapsed. I think it's his heart. Please send help." My voice quivered. Mom hovered over him, whispering, I'm sorry," over and over as if trying to undo everything that had been said. Dad's face glistened with sweat. His lips parted in a desperate attempt for air. My siblings, awakened by the commotion, appeared behind me in the hallway. Mary was trembling. Sharon already had tears running down her cheeks. Lane clutched Nemo, eyes huge with terror. Seconds felt like hours. I just kept repeating the address to the operator. "Please hurry, please," I begged. Mom stroked Dad's hair, sobbing. I saw the guilt in her eyes, maybe regret or terror that her betrayal had triggered something in him. He was only in his early 40s, far too young for a stroke. Or was it a heart attack? I couldn't tell. My mind was a whirlwind. When the paramedics finally arrived, they burst through the front door in a flurry of motion and gear. They examined Dad, hooking him to machines, speaking in clipped tones about blood pressure and vitals. "He's unresponsive," one of them said. Mom kept back, trembling so violently that Mary had to catch her by the shoulders. I hovered near Lane, who was sobbing into my arm. Dad looked so pale, so still. I wanted to scream, "Hang on, you can't leave us!" But no words came. The paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher, hustling out. Mom followed them like a ghost, barefoot, hair messy from all the tears. That left me, standing in our front hall with my siblings. I could still feel the echo of Dad's collapse vibrating through the air. The phone was on the floor. The call ended, but the screen still lit. I stood in shock, images flooding my head, the accusations, the word revenge, my father gasping for breath. Then, in the quiet left behind, I realized something crucial. The betrayal, whatever shape it took, was real, and it might have destroyed our family in one brutal instant. Dad died that same day. We later learned it was a catastrophic stroke, triggered by extreme stress. The doctors asked a lot of questions. Had he shown symptoms? Had there been a family history? Each question felt like a jagged needle. The only answer I could think of was that the heartbreak of Mom's affair had pushed him over the edge. But I didn't say it out loud, didn't need to. The guilt in Mom's eyes told the story. Within hours, we were drowning in condolences. Neighbors brought casseroles and tearful hugs. Aunt Christine arrived from out of town, stepping in like a whirlwind of concern. She was Dad's sister paternal aunt to us kids, and I remembered meeting her when I was small, though I hadn't seen her in years. She looked older, obviously, with worry lines carved into her face as soon as she learned the news. She tried to comfort us. She tried to comfort Mom. But Mom avoided her, drifting around the house like a ghost, refusing to talk. Aunt Christine quietly told me she suspected tension between them dated back to before I was born. Something about money, maybe. Or maybe it was just the family friction that grew once Dad married our mother. The funeral was scheduled for a chilly Saturday. We set it at a modest funeral home near the edge of town. Outside, the wind whipped around the parking lot, scattering old leaves in spirals. People trickled in Dad's co-workers from his second job at a hardware store, some distant relatives we'd never met, a few neighbors who'd known him. They all wore that same sorrowful expression, like they couldn't believe such a kind young man was gone. Mom arrived last, wearing a plain black dress. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She avoided looking at anyone, especially Aunt Christine. She gave off a vibe like she expected to be scorned by the crowd, and maybe she was right. I heard murmurs in corners, people whispering about an affair. They tried to hush up whenever we kids passed by, but I still caught scraps. She was caught, apparently. He found out and had a stroke. So tragic. Standing by Dad's casket, I watched all these mourners approach, some with tears, some just pensive. A few said how they wished they'd known he was under so much stress. I wanted to scream that it wasn't stress from money or normal adult problems. It was heartbreak, betrayal. But I kept my mouth shut because who was I to accuse my mother openly in front of everyone? My siblings hovered around me like small birds who'd lost their nest. Sharon tried to console Lane, who was shaking in a small suit that was too big for him. Mary wore a black dress for the first time in her life, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Allison, my oldest sister, stood stiffly, arms around Mary and Lane, protective and grim. When the service began, we filed into rows of chairs. The funeral director said a few words about Dad's life, his dedication to family, his kindness, the warmth he brought to any conversation. Each praise felt like a punch to my chest. Aunt Christine stood up front next, trembling as she read a short eulogy. She recalled how Dad used to push her on the swings at the old park. She mentioned how he always tried to fix things himself, like the paint on our house or the brakes in her car, because he wanted to spare everyone else the trouble. I caught glimpses of tearful smiles from the crowd. Mom stood near the back, face pale, arms folded over herself as if warding off some invisible chill. She never spoke. She never offered any words of tribute. She just stared at Dad's coffin, eyes brimming with regrets I couldn't even start to decipher. Once Aunt Christine finished, the funeral director thanked everyone for coming, and folks lined up to offer condolences. I remember one older neighbor, Mr. Barnes, stepping up to me with watery eyes. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Son," he whispered, "your dad was a good man. He always helped me fix my fence when it blew down in storms. I'm so sorry." I just nodded, numb. At some point, I sensed a presence behind me. It was Mr. Raymond Carter, Dad's longtime friend and co-worker at the hardware store. He was tall, with a silver mustache. He pulled me into a gentle hug, the kind I normally would have wriggled out of. But right then, I clung to it. He murmured, "Davis, I know things are tough. Your dad was proud of you. He talked about you all the time." My eyes burned. "Thanks," I managed. I wish I could have done something." He sighed. "No one can predict a stroke, son. Don't blame yourself." His glance slid to Mom across the room, then back to me with a flicker of concern. He didn't say more, but I got the impression he understood more than he was letting on. We concluded the service in a quiet hush. The burial took place in a small cemetery outside town, near some pine trees Dad used to love. As we stood there watching the casket lower, Mom finally broke down, sobbing. She knelt, pressing a hand over her eyes as if the finality of the moment shattered whatever composure she had left. Aunt Christine guided us home, driving our battered family sedan. Mom rode in the passenger seat, hardly speaking. All of us kids were crammed in the back, except Mary insisted on sitting up front, presumably to keep an eye on Mom. Once home, we found the living room stacked with foil-covered dishes from well-meaning neighbors. I felt hollow. Late that evening, a few straggling relatives drifted in to pay respects. They all left soon after, apparently sensing the tension. Aunt Christine tried to coax Mom into eating. Mom refused. She went to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. That left the rest of us in the silent living room. Mr. Carter visited briefly, offering me a slip of paper with his phone number. "If you need anything," he said, "call me." After he left, Aunt Christine sighed. "Davis, honey, do you want me to stay a while? Look after you kids?" I glanced at my siblings. They were shell-shocked, Mary in tears, Lane leaning against Sharon's shoulder. "Maybe that would be good," I said. "I'm not sure if Mom can handle us right now." She pursed her lips, nodding. There was a weight behind her gaze that said she suspected something deeper was wrong. But she let it be for the night. "I'll sleep on the couch," she murmured. I retreated to my room, heart throbbing with raw grief. I stared at the ceiling, imagining Dad's voice telling me everything would be okay. My eyes burned with fresh tears. The memory of him collapsed on the kitchen floor replayed in my mind, a loop I couldn't escape. Eventually, exhaustion pushed me into a fitful sleep, haunted by the knowledge that we'd never see Dad's easy smile again. He was gone, and the reason hovered like a dark cloud. My mother's betrayal, the heartbreak that ended a good man's life. In the days to follow, I'd come to resent how quietly everything turned, how people moved on or whispered half-facts. But one thing was clear. My mother was a central figure in all this pain, and I couldn't look at her the same way, not after burying my father who died with a shattered heart. And none of us knew how to move forward from that kind of wreckage. The morning after the funeral, our home felt like a hollow shell. Aunt Christine was up early, brewing coffee in the kitchen, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. It was awkward, though she didn't know our usual routines. She just did what she could, tossing bread into the toaster, offering jam and butter. We appreciated the gesture, but the tension in the air never loosened. Mom was nowhere in sight. As soon as dawn broke, she'd slipped out. No note, no explanation. A part of me wondered if she'd gone to see the man she was secretly calling before Dad's stroke. That thought made my stomach twist. Aunt Christine caught my scowl. "She left about half an hour ago," she said softly. I tried to ask where she was going, but she just shook her head. I forced a shrug. "Nothing new, I guess." She sighed, fiddling with her mug. "I wish I could help." Your father was my little brother. I can't wrap my head around losing him this way. I glanced away, not wanting her to see how much that statement hurt. Lane wandered into the kitchen, hair messy, rubbing his eyes. "Is breakfast ready?" he asked timidly. He'd been so quiet since Dad passed, I half expected him to vanish behind the furniture. Aunt Christine offered a gentle smile. "Got some toast and jam. You want orange juice?" Lane nodded. For a moment, he looked like he was about to cry. I nudged him toward the table, trying to be the calm older brother. I realized we all had to piece ourselves together, with or without Mom's help. Later that day, Mr. Raymond Carter dropped by. He was carrying a folder and wearing a somber expression. Aunt Christine greeted him at the door, leading him into the living room. I sat on the sofa with Lane, while Mary hovered in the doorway, arms crossed. Sharon was up in her room, trying to read or distract herself from reality. "Davis, how you holding up?" Mr. Carter asked, settling into an armchair. He looked genuinely worried. I shrugged. "We're managing, I guess." He tapped the folder. "I came by because there's some business from your dad's workplace. Papers that need signing, insurance forms, that kind of thing. Normally your mother would handle it, but..." He hesitated, eyeing the empty hallway. "Is she around?" Aunt Christine shook her head. "She left. We don't know when she'll be back." A heavy silence. Mr. Carter exhaled. "I can wait, or we can fill some out if you're authorized. But mostly I just wanted to let you know I'm here for you kids. Your dad was a friend. If you need help with anything, groceries, rides, a little money, don't be shy." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thanks," I managed. "I appreciate it." He gave a tight nod, then turned to Aunt Christine. "Would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? I have a few more delicate details to share, maybe better said in private." She glanced at me, uncertain, but I waved them off. "Go ahead," I said. "We'll be fine." Lane busied himself with a coloring book, and Mary just stared at the floor. They left for the porch, voices low. Mary plopped onto the couch next to me. "I hate all this," she muttered. "I hate the way people keep looking at us with pity, like we're broken. And Mom, God, I just want to scream at her." I nodded. "Yeah, me too." Then I glanced at Lane, who was trying to focus on coloring but clearly listening. Mom returned about an hour later. She stepped inside, saw Mr. Carter's car outside, and frowned. Aunt Christine followed her into the kitchen, trying to explain that he was here about insurance. Mom just scowled. "I'll sign whatever." "I don't really care." That nonchalant attitude stung. Aunt Christine pressed her gently. "Care to read the documents first? This is about your husband's life insurance, the beneficiaries, all that." Mom's eyes flickered with something like shame. She grabbed the folder and muttered, "Fine!" without further protest. A short while later, Mr. Carter politely said his goodbyes, leaving the folder on the table. He gave me a final pat on the shoulder, asked me to call if anything came up. Then he was gone. I think we all felt his departure like a light turning off. Later that afternoon, I found Aunt Christine in the living room talking to Mom. Their voices were tense. Mom's nails tapped against the coffee table in an unsteady rhythm. "I understand you're grieving," Aunt Christine said, trying to keep calm. "But these kids need stability. They need you present." Mom refused to meet her eyes. "I didn't ask for your advice. You disappeared from our lives a long time ago. Why do you suddenly care?" A flash of hurt crossed Aunt Christine's face. "I always cared. Your husband was my brother. I tried to stay in touch, but it was impossible with all your hostility." Mom clenched her jaw. "My hostility? Don't pretend you know me or my life." They glared at each other. I half expected yelling, but the tension was more like a standoff, silent and cutting. Finally, Aunt Christine softened her tone. "Look, I'm not trying to fight, I'm just worried. If you're overwhelmed, let me help. Maybe I can take the kids for a few weeks." That suggestion made my blood run cold. Take us away? My eyes darted to Mary, who stood in the doorway, fists clenched. Lane was in the backyard, oblivious. Sharon was in her room. Mom scoffed. "You want to rip my kids away from me right after their father dies? How dare you?" "It's not about ripping them away," Aunt Christine insisted. "They're obviously not your priority right now. I'm offering a safe environment until you pull yourself together. I stepped forward, tension bursting inside me. Stop, I said, voice trembling. We're not going anywhere. We can stay here. Aunt Christine looked at me, concern etched across her face. Davis, you're just a child. You shouldn't have to carry all this. Mom's gaze darted to me as well. For a moment, she seemed grateful for my interference, or maybe relieved she didn't have to keep arguing. Then, as if remembering the reason behind everything, she cast her eyes down. Leave us alone, she finally told Aunt Christine. We'll handle it. Aunt Christine shook her head in obvious dismay but didn't push further. She rose from the couch, murmuring, I'll be around if you change your mind. I'm staying at the motel off Route 9 for a few days. After she left, Mom sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands. I hovered near, unsure if I should comfort her or demand answers. The air felt thick with resentments unspoken. Dad was gone, and every crack in our family was suddenly exposed. Eventually, Mom spoke, muffled. I'm sorry, Davis. I know this is all so messed up. I swallowed hard. It is, I replied. Why don't you tell me what's going on? She lifted her head. Tears stained her cheeks, though frustration glimmered in her eyes. It's complicated. Your father, he was going to do something drastic. He threatened me, said he'd ruin everything for me and my friend. She paused, grimacing like the word friend was inaccurate. But I never meant for him to die. My gut churned at her calling it never meant for him to die, as if that excused the betrayal. But before I could respond, Lane walked in from the backyard, looking between us. His innocent face reminded me that, for now, I had to keep it together. So I didn't press her further, even though a part of me wanted to unleash every bit of anger. I just helped Lane get a snack. Meanwhile, Mom slumped deeper into the couch, haunted by whatever guilt and confusion she carried. If Dad had planned revenge, none of us would ever know its shape now. That chance was gone the moment he collapsed, leaving behind a broken home and the seeds of bitterness that would only grow if we didn't find a way to uproot them. By the time I turned 15, the small house we once called home felt more like a worn-out motel with a revolving door for strangers. After Dad's funeral, Mom sank into a haze of booze, late nights, and whispered phone calls. I tried to push away the memory of his final day, but the echoes never left. It was like the walls were still soaked in his voice, in the heartbreak that brought him down. We were surviving barely. Aunt Christine stayed a few weeks, but tensions boiled over whenever she challenged Mom's decisions. Eventually, she left in frustration, parting with a promise to keep tabs on us. I figured that was just polite talk. In truth, it felt like we were alone. I remember the first time a new boyfriend showed up on our doorstep, a gruff guy named Brent, all tattoos and swagger. Lane was rummaging in the kitchen for cereal, and I heard them talking in hush-hush tones. Moments later, they slipped into Mom's bedroom, door clicking shut. The strangeness of it all made my stomach churn. I wondered if Dad would have recognized her anymore. Our living room had become a dumping ground for clutter, empty beer cans, old magazines, and a stack of overdue bills no one paid attention to. Sharon, my second eldest sister, tried to keep some order for Lane's sake. She'd pick up random trash, sighing as she tossed it into the overflowing bin. Mary, who was just a year younger than me, fought her own battles, part teenage rebellion, part furious resentment at Mom. If she wasn't out stomping around the neighborhood, she was locked in her room, scribbling in a sketchbook or blasting music through cheap earbuds. Allison, the oldest, took on the role of caretaker the best she could. She was barely 18, studying for some future that kept slipping away. At least once a week, she threatened to leave but stuck around because she didn't want to abandon us. I guess none of us wanted to admit we were drowning. School was a blur. I juggled classes in the mornings and odd jobs in the afternoons. A friend from across town, Toby, got me a gig hauling scrap from a mechanic's yard. It paid next to nothing, but it was cash I used to buy groceries, figure out which sibling needed shoes, that kind of thing. One night I staggered home after dark, sweaty and exhausted from hauling old car parts. The house was oddly quiet. Usually we'd hear Mary raging at the TV or Lane rummaging for snacks. But when I stepped into the living room, I saw Mom slumped on the couch with an empty bottle near her feet. A cigarette smoldered in an ashtray on the table, the smell of stale smoke clinging to the drapes. "Davis," she mumbled, not even lifting her head. "Where have you been?" "Working," I said simply. "Need anything?" My voice was cold, even though part of me hated it. She laughed, low and bitter. "I need a lot of things. Dunno if you can fix them." I just nodded, leaving her to whatever pity party she was hosting in her head. Down the hall, I heard Mary's door slam. We'd learned to get by on these half-conversations that led nowhere. But the real crack showed in how we siblings drifted. Mary kept pushing boundaries. She'd disappear after school, showing up late with eyes red from either crying or smoking something she shouldn't. Sharon tried to hold the line, but she had her own world of online classes or writing short stories that no one read. Allison, balancing part-time work at a local clinic, had enough on her plate. And then there was Lane, at 10 years old, looking to me like I was the only stable force in his life. I'd catch him quietly crying some nights, hugging a stuffed shark he named Nemo. He wouldn't say it, but I knew it was about Dad. Sometimes he'd ask, "Why did Dad have to go?" And I never had a good answer. In that swirling mess, I learned to grit my teeth and push ahead. I was failing half my classes, but teachers who knew my situation cut me slack. They probably felt sorry for me, the fatherless kid who was basically raising a bunch of younger siblings. I hated their pity, but I needed the break. Money got tighter. Mom's part-time job cleaning motel rooms was a joke. She seldom showed up sober enough to keep it. The boyfriends who drifted in and out seldom brought anything but trouble. At best, they threw a few dollars on the table for pizza. At worst, they scowled at us or made creepy remarks. We tried to steer clear whenever a new one arrived, but sometimes we got stuck in the crossfire of arguments about rent, bills, or who was sleeping with whom. Day by day, it became clearer we were on our own. One night I sat in the backyard with a flashlight and a stack of overdue utility bills. The wind rustled the fence, a sad memory of Dad who used to fix its broken slats. I traced his name on each envelope, remembering how he always tried to spare us the burden. Now, it was all on me. That sorrow twisted into anger. Anger at him for dying, at Mom for betraying him, at me for not saving him. My stomach tightened with the taste of revenge. It was a weird feeling, like Dad's final heartbreak lingered in our house, fueling my resentment. A small, dark part of me wished something equally painful would happen to Mom, so she'd understand what Dad felt in his last moments. But I pushed that thought down, disgusted at myself. After all, she was still my mother, no matter how broken. At 15, you're not supposed to feel so much hatred, but life forced me to grow up fast. And I had no idea just how bad things could get until the night everything truly went off the rails, the night a boyfriend set his sights on Mary. It was late, maybe near midnight, and the air felt thick with summer heat. I was in my room, an old converted den near the back, lying on a rickety cot. Work had drained me, and I was half asleep when I heard Mary's muffled yell from the living room. At first I thought it was another argument, but something in her voice sounded sharper, more frightened. I sprang up and hurried down the hall. The overhead light was off, but a lamp glowed near the couch. Mary was pinned beneath one of Mom's newer boyfriends, this slimy guy called Wayne or Wade. I never remembered exactly. He reeked of beer, his hand clamped over Mary's mouth as she struggled. My stomach lurched. "Get off her!" I shouted. I grabbed his shoulder, yanking him backward. He stumbled but refused to release Mary. Instead, he snarled, turning on me with eyes wild from either alcohol or pure malice. Mary managed to slip free, gasping, tears streaking her face. She darted behind me, trembling. I realized I was facing a grown man, tall, wiry, full of drunken aggression. I was 15 and only half his weight, but adrenaline roared in my veins. I spotted a heavy pipe wrench on the coffee table. It was Dad's old tool, ironically one of the last things I had from him. Without thinking, I snatched it up. Wayne smirked. "Watch it, kid," he slurred, stepping forward, arms raised. "Your sister invited me to watch a movie. Then she started teasing me." His words were vile, reeking of blame. Mary's strangled sob told me she'd done nothing of the sort. Fear and rage blinded me. I swung the wrench, yelling for him to back off. Maybe he thought I was bluffing, or maybe he was just too drunk to care because he lunged. I brought the wrench down sideways, cracking him across the shoulder. He howled, stumbled, but didn't drop. He charged again, fists swinging. I ducked on instinct, gripping the tool with sweaty hands. Mary screamed, "Davis, watch out!" But my mind was in overdrive. I managed a second swing, this time hooking him across the side. The impact knocked him sideways into the end table. A vase shattered. He groaned, cursing as he slumped. I stood over him, chest heaving, the wrench raised. In that instant, I felt something primal like Dad's heartbreak. My own fury, all that sadness coiled into violence. Part of me wanted to keep swinging until he couldn't get up, but Mary's hand grabbed my arm. "Stop!" she whispered, voice shaking. "That's enough." Wayne clutched his side, glaring at us with glassy eyes. "You're gonna pay for this," he spat. Then he staggered to his feet, snatched his coat, and lurched out the door into the hot night. I collapsed onto the couch, heart thudding like a drum. Mary sank beside me, sobbing. Mom was nowhere to be found. Probably passed out in her bedroom or off at the bar. Sharon and Lane woke up from the commotion, stumbling into the living room. Sharon flicked on the overhead light and gasped when she saw the shards of the vase, the scuff marks on the floor where Wayne nearly pinned Mary. Lane stood wide-eyed, hugging Nemo so tightly his knuckles whitened. "What the hell happened?" Sharon demanded, voice wavering. Mary just cried, and I was too shaken to explain properly. Finally, I managed. He grabbed her. I had to stop him." My grip on the wrench loosened, the tool clattering to the floor. Sharon's face darkened. She wrapped an arm around Mary, tears brimming in her own eyes. "Is she hurt?" Mary shook her head, pressing her forehead to Sharon's shoulder. Her trembling wouldn't stop. Lane just stood there, looking from the broken vase to Mary's tear-streaked face. He asked in a broken voice, "Where's Mom?" The answer was silence. I felt a fresh wave of disgust. This was our life now, defending ourselves against the men Mom brought home. Anger ignited in me again. Dad was gone, and I was the one protecting my sisters from monsters in the living room. We spent the rest of that night barricaded together. I set the chain lock on the front door, half expecting Wayne to return with a vengeance. Eventually, Mary fell asleep on the couch, Sharon dozed in a nearby chair, and Lane curled up against me, the stuffed shark pressed between us. Dawn broke through the blinds before Mom finally showed. She stepped in, reeking of whiskey, took one look at the shattered vase, and rolled her eyes. "What happened here?" she muttered. I slowly stood, fists clenched. "Your boyfriend tried to assault Mary. I stopped him." Her face paled, maybe guilt, maybe fear, but she didn't say much else. Just mumbled something about how it wasn't her fault. The stench of betrayal filled the room again, as if Dad's ghost watched us from a corner, silently demanding justice. If this was my mother's idea of moving on, it was a nightmare. That afternoon, after the chaos settled, I waited for her to at least show some maternal instinct, to comfort Mary, or call the cops, or do anything. Instead, she hid in her bedroom with another bottle. That's when I made the decision. If she wouldn't protect us, I would, even if it meant kicking her out. The very next day, news of the fight rippled through the neighborhood. A few folks whispered that I nearly killed a guy with a wrench. Others claimed Mary was at fault somehow. Typical rumor mill nonsense. But one person I wasn't expecting to see was Aunt Christine. She turned up on our doorstep that Sunday morning with a tense expression, like she was bracing for a hurricane. She wasted no time. "Where's your mother?" she asked bluntly. Mom had stumbled out earlier, presumably to track Wayne down or find another bar. I just shrugged. "Not here. Guess she's busy." Aunt Christine exhaled, stepping into the living room. She took one glance at the messy couch, the broken vase shards we'd swept into a corner, and gave a soft, disapproving cluck. Then her gaze fell on Mary, who was perched near the window, quietly sketching in a notebook. Mary kept her head down, ignoring Aunt Christine's arrival. Finally, Aunt Christine bent beside Mary. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Mary shrugged, lips pressed tight. She refused to make eye contact. The bruises on her wrists were faint but visible. Aunt Christine noticed them, let out a soft gasp, and turned to me. "What on earth is going on here, Davis?" I steeled myself. "A boyfriend tried to mess with her. I stopped him. That's all." She shook her head in disbelief. "Davis, you can't live like this. I should have taken you and your siblings when your father passed, but..." She paused, glancing away. I sensed regret in her voice. I tried reaching out, but your mother always shut me down. I folded my arms. Yeah, well, it's not your decision. We're not leaving. Her eyes flicked to Lane, who sat at the kitchen table, fiddling with a half-eaten bowl of cereal. He's just a kid. You're all kids. This is insane. Behind her, Sharon emerged from the hallway, carrying a laundry basket. She wore her usual tired expression. We appreciate the concern, Sharon said carefully, but Davis isn't going anywhere. There was a finality in her tone that caught even me off guard. Aunt Christine rested a hand on the back of the sofa. Look, you're all underage except Allison, who's barely an adult herself. Maybe foster care. No, I snapped, a bit louder than intended. We're not splitting up. We'll figure it out. I got a job. We have food. She held up a hand. I'm not your enemy, Davis, but I'm terrified someone will get hurt again. Her gaze flicked pointedly at Mary's bruises. That landed like a punch to my gut, because she wasn't wrong. But the idea of letting strangers take us was worse. Dad always insisted we stick together. The memory of him, that paternal warmth, still lingered in corners of the house. I couldn't betray that, no matter how dark things got. After a tense silence, Aunt Christine sighed. All right. If you refuse outside help, then at least let me stay nearby for a bit. She revealed she'd rented a small place down the street for a week. I can check in daily, maybe provide groceries. Could you at least allow that? Sharon and I exchanged glances. Finally, I nodded. Yeah, that might help. Later that afternoon, she drove off to get her bags. I sank onto the couch next to Mary. She was drawing lines that formed a rough sketch of a woman's silhouette with a blurred face. Maybe it was Mom, maybe not. You okay? I asked softly. She shrugged. I guess. I'm just done being afraid. Me too, I thought. Then a quick knock on the front door startled us. I opened it to find Mr. Raymond Carter standing there, wearing a concerned expression and holding a grocery bag. Heard about some trouble, he muttered. Figured you might need something to eat. We'd barely seen him since Dad's funeral, but the warmth in his voice felt like a faint echo of Dad. He stepped inside, eyes scanning the living room. You kids alone again? I nodded. Mom's out. He sighed. Davis, if you ever need a place to crash or a friendly ear, my door is open. He set the groceries on our rickety table. Your father was a good man. I can't fill his shoes, but I can try to help. For a fleeting second, I saw what Dad might have looked like if he'd aged. The same gentle lines around the eyes. It made my throat tighten. Thanks, I managed. He offered a faint smile. I'll be around, he said, and left, leaving behind a small kindness that felt huge in a house full of chaos. That evening, we discovered a couple of the bills had been mysteriously paid online, possibly Aunt Christine or even Mr. Carter. No one claimed responsibility. But it gave me hope that we weren't entirely alone. A part of Dad still lived in these people who cared about us. Mom returned around midnight, smelling of stale liquor. She balked when she saw Aunt Christine's car in the driveway, cursing under her breath. Then she stumbled inside. What the hell is she doing here? Mom asked, voice laced with bitterness. I stood my ground. She's helping us. If you've got a problem, maybe you should leave. Mom's eyes flashed with rage. This is my house. Don't talk to me like that. She lurched forward, but I held her gaze, refusing to budge. Eventually, she scoffed, turning toward her bedroom. You'll regret this, she muttered under her breath. All of you. Something in her tone made me uneasy, like a warning or a threat, but I was past caring. I just wanted to keep my siblings safe. In that moment, Dad's face flashed in my mind, his gentle smile, the way he'd ruffle my hair. A pang of grief and determination flared in my chest. Whatever revenge Dad might have wanted against Mom for her betrayal, I realized the best vengeance I could offer was to make sure her attempts at chaos failed. I would hold this family together, no matter what. About a month after the pipe wrench incident, a rumor filtered through town that Henry White, an older plumber infamous for his short temper and love of whiskey, was looking for an undertheatable helper. My friend Toby nudged me. You're always fixing stuff around your place? Maybe you can do it for pay? I was 15, failing half my classes, But I had a knack for repairs. Dad taught me the basics when I was little, plus necessity forced me to learn more. So one muggy afternoon, I walked 2 miles to Henry's workshop on the outskirts. He was hunched over a battered toolbox, cursing at a stuck valve. The place smelled like rust and pipe sealant. "Mister?" "White?" I said, clearing my throat. "I heard you need help." He lifted his head, bushy eyebrows furrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "Davis Crawford. My father passed away a while back." My voice caught slightly. "I can work cheap. I'm good with tools. I just need money." His gaze flicked over me, noticing my scuffed jeans and determined stance. "Kid, I don't hire minors. Liability's a pain in the ass." I swallowed. "I'll work off the books. I won't tell if you won't. I can do grunt work, carry your stuff, help with repairs." I paused, then admitted quietly, "My family needs the income." He stared a moment, then snorted. "You got guts. All right, but keep your mouth shut. I pay in cash. You do the dirty jobs I hate. Deal?" I nodded, relief flooding me. Deal. That was how my double life began. Student by morning, barely. Plumber's assistant by afternoon. Henry was perpetually half drunk, but he knew his trade. Day one, he handed me a snake tool, told me to unclog a nasty drain in a rundown trailer. I gagged at the smell, but I stuck with it. The payoff was $40 in my hand. Enough for groceries or maybe the electric bill if we pooled resources. Word spread that Henry had a new lackey. Some folks teased me, but I learned fast. He taught me to replace seals, fix leaking pipes, patch boilers. My muscles ached from crawling under sinks in cramped trailers, but I felt proud for the first time in ages. At home, I used these skills to keep our battered plumbing functional. Mom never thanked me, of course. She either came or went with boyfriends, turning more reckless. Aunt Christine hovered near, occasionally stopping by with groceries or handing me leftover produce. She and Mom bickered, but she refused to vanish again. Sharon made a weak joke once that Aunt Christine was our guardian angel in denim. Allison started volunteering at a local clinic after school, learning basic patient care. She often returned with bandages or advice on how to treat cuts and bruises handy in our chaotic household. Meanwhile, Mary quietly retreated into her sketchbooks. I'd find pages filled with haunting images of sorrowful faces or swirling black lines that looked like storms. Lane, he drifted. Sometimes he followed me around while I did minor house repairs. He asked questions about plumbing or about Dad or about why everything felt so wrong. I never had decent answers, but I tried. That was all I could do. One afternoon, I came home from a day's work with Henry to see Mary doodling a rough design of our kitchen sink. She frowned at the crooked faucet. "Think you can fix that?" she asked. "Sure. If I can't, I'll ask Henry for tips." She flashed a rare grin. "You're turning into a real plumber, huh?" It felt good to see her smile, even if briefly. That grin vanished later, though, when Mom stumbled in with a man I'd never met. He offered me a slimy handshake. "Name's Gavin," he drawled. "Got any beers?" I sighed and told him there was water in the fridge. Mom shot me a dark look, as if I'd insulted her new fling, but I'd run out of patience months ago. That night, Mary locked herself in her room again. Sharon hid behind her laptop, presumably finishing a short story for an online contest. Lane fell asleep on the couch. Nemo clutched tight. Mom and Gavin argued over music choices, then she disappeared into her bedroom with him. I heard muffled laughter, the door clicking shut. Even though it was just mild adult intimacy, I felt my skin crawl. The idea that Mom had replaced Dad so easily tore open old wounds, but I forced my mind elsewhere on the memory of Dad's final hours, on how his heart gave out when he confronted her betrayal. Part of me wanted to see her pay. Another part realized I had to stand guard. There was no cavalry to rescue us. We had to rescue ourselves. That's what plumbing gave me, a sense of control in a world turned upside down. Every time I tightened a bolt or unclogged a drain, I fought back the chaos swirling in our home. Henry sometimes nodded grudging approval in between bouts of cursing or sipping from a dented flask. "You got skill, kid," he'd say. "Might make a real plumber someday." Hearing that, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe if I kept at it, I could become something. Maybe I could protect my siblings better with a steady job. In the background, though, Dad's ghost still haunted me, his heartbreak fueling a slow burn of resentment. Each time I glimpsed Mom's drunken smirk or caught the stench of some new boyfriend's cologne, I thought of how Dad never got to see me grow up, never got to fix the house or watch us graduate. And maybe that heartbreak was my own personal brand of revenge, a vow to never let her forget what she cost us. But for now, I fixed pipes by day, survived chaos by night, ignoring the dread that more trouble lay ahead. At 15, it was all I could do: keep the water flowing, hold the family together with duct tape and determination, and pray the cracks wouldn't swallow us whole. I still remember the day I got Wilma's phone call. It was a warm Tuesday morning, one of those days where you can practically taste summer in the air. I'd been working as a plumber for years, ever since I passed my licensing exam at 23, and I'd built a modest reputation around town. Most of my clients lived in standard ranch houses or weather-beaten trailers, the kind of jobs no big plumbing company wanted. But Wilma's call was different right from the start. I was in my cramped truck heading back from a job replacing a water heater when my phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was raspy but cheerful, an older woman who introduced herself as Wilma Anderson. She said a mutual acquaintance, an old hardware store owner, gave her my number, claiming I was reliable. Then, in the same breath, she complained her boiler was wheezing like an old mule, which made me chuckle despite myself. "What's your location?" I asked, expecting an address nearby. She laughed. "I'm out on Lambkin Road, near Good Heart. You know, by Lake Michigan. You might need four-wheel drive. The driveway's a mess." Her frank tone reminded me of certain no-nonsense aunts or older teachers who never sugarcoated anything. I scribbled down the directions on a notepad balanced against my steering wheel. By the time I hung up, I'd already decided I'd help her out, even if it meant a bumpy drive and a late lunch. Something in her voice tugged at me. She sounded tough as nails, yet polite enough to say please and thank you. So I turned onto the highway leading north, passing stretches of pine forest. The day grew quiet, my mind wandering back to my siblings. Allison was finishing up another day at a small medical clinic. She was on track to become a nurse practitioner. Sharon, 19 now, was off exploring community college options. Mary, 15, spent her free time sketching or pushing boundaries, though thankfully not as severely as in her rebellious peak. And Lane was 13, always with a fishing rod in hand, dreaming of hooking the biggest catch. The house we shared was cramped, but we'd made it work after everything that happened. As I neared Good Heart, I felt that old ache in my chest. This area was so unlike the rough parts of my hometown, lush, tranquil, almost too peaceful for someone used to constant tension. The asphalt turned to gravel, then to rutted dirt. Eventually, I spotted a mailbox labeled Anderson in faded letters. Wilma wasn't kidding about needing four-wheel drive. My truck lurched along a narrow path lined by tall pines. Shadows flickered across my windshield, making it feel like I was stepping into another world. Finally, I reached a clearing, and my breath caught. The house was perched on a small ridge overlooking Lake Michigan. Pale sunlight shimmered on the water in the distance, the surface shifting like a restless dream. The house itself looked older, maybe built in the 50s, painted a worn shade of blue, with a sagging porch that had seen better days. Before I could even knock, the front door creaked open. A petite woman, stooped with age but radiating energy, beckoned me inside. "You must be Davis," she said, her voice raspy yet bright. She wore a patterned scarf tied around her hair, and her eyes were surprisingly sharp. "I'm Wilma. Come on, no time to dawdle. The boiler's in the basement." I stepped into the living room and froze for a moment. Paintings covered every wall, some landscapes of rolling hills and shorelines, others portraits so lifelike they seemed to watch me. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and old books. Wilma noticed my stare and grinned. "I used to paint landscapes, though my late husband Philip was the real artist. He did these portraits over the years." "They're incredible," I said, meaning it. "I've never seen so many paintings in one place." She waved a hand dismissively. That's what happens when two artists spend a lifetime together. The walls become our personal gallery. She led me to a door by the kitchen that opened into a narrow staircase. The basement was dim, the walls lined with shelves of paint cans, brushes, and strange contraptions. Toward the far corner was the boiler, a hulking metal beast that clanked ominously. Wilma clicked on a dusty overhead bulb and said, "I can't keep the heat going. It sputters and rattles, and I'm too old to freeze in my own home." I knelt down, shining my flashlight around the pressure gauge and valves. Sure enough, the system hissed in protest, and I spotted patches of rust. "This is pretty ancient," I murmured, "but let me see what I can do." For the next half hour, I tinkered with corroded pipes and a failing pump. Wilma hovered close, arms folded, occasionally firing off questions about tools or my background. I admitted I'd been a plumber most of my adult life, forging my own path after some tough family times. She gave a knowing nod, like she'd heard such stories before. When I finally found the main issue, a failing pressure relief valve, I straightened up, wiping sweat off my brow. "I need a replacement part," I told her. "Might take a day or so to get it, but I can do a temporary fix so you'll have some heat." She squinted at me. "You do that, and you can call me Wilma, not Mrs. Anderson. You're too polite for your own good." I smiled, hooking my flashlight to my tool belt. "All right, Wilma. I'll put in a quick patch now and return with the right valve tomorrow or the next day." We headed back upstairs, where the living room's vibrant colors assaulted my senses after the basement gloom. Wilma sank onto a worn armchair, watching me gather my toolbox. "You're younger than I expected," she remarked. "Figured a plumber with so many references might be, I don't know, middle-aged with a gut." A laugh escaped me. "I get that sometimes. Started working early. I guess word just travels in small towns." She tapped her fingers on the armrest, gazing at a painting of a woman in a field. "Well, if you're free tomorrow, I'd appreciate you hurrying back. The nights by the lake get cold, even in early summer." I promised to do my best. Before leaving, I paused by the largest portrait in the room, a man with kind eyes and a slight smile, wearing a paint-stained smock. I guessed it was Philip. In the background of the painting, I spotted a glimmering stretch of water that had to be Lake Michigan. Wilma noticed my interest. "That's my husband," she said softly. "He passed years back, but I still feel him in the wind off the lake, in the sunrise over the water. Art has a way of keeping people alive." Her words stirred something in me, reminding me of the father I lost and the heartbreak that once tore our family apart. But I pushed the thought away, clearing my throat. "I'll be back soon, Wilma. Try to stay warm in the meantime." She thanked me, and I stepped onto the porch. The view took my breath again, endless water stretching toward the horizon. A breeze ruffled my shirt, carrying the faintest scent of pine. As I drove off, I realized my shoulders felt lighter than usual. There was something comforting about that old house and the woman who lived there. Maybe it was the reminder that not all older folks were like my mother, lost in bitterness. Some, like Wilma, endured heartbreak but held on to warmth and humor. That evening, as I pulled up to our small rental home, my siblings bombarded me with updates. Allison discussing her long shift at the clinic, Mary showing me a half-finished drawing, Lane boasting about a fish he almost caught, Sharon cooking a pot of chili. Normal life rolled on, chaotic but alive. Yet in the back of my mind, I kept seeing Wilma's living room of paintings, hearing her spirited voice. Something told me tomorrow's return visit would matter more than I realized. Maybe it was a new chapter, a subtle shift away from the ghosts that haunted me, toward a future full of possibilities I'd never considered. I returned to Wilma's place the very next day, armed with a replacement valve, wrenches, and a reluctant optimism. Driving up her long lane, I was struck by how quickly the scenery had imprinted itself on my mind: tall pines, bits of gravel crunching under my tires, a sense of calm I hadn't felt in ages. She greeted me at the door with a sly grin. "Right on time," she said. "You're almost too punctual. Wait till you see how temperamental that boiler is today." She wasn't exaggerating. The moment I switched it on, the boiler rattled and hissed in protest. I spent a solid hour swapping out the corroded valve, tightening connections and clearing a layer of gunk from the internal piping. Wilma hovered in the background, arms folded like a supervising foreman, occasionally asking about my process. When I finished, I flipped the switch, and the boiler hummed a more soothing tune. "Should be stable now," I told her. "You'll want a more modern setup eventually, but this'll hold." She gave me a grateful nod. Let me guess you're about to hand me a steep bill. I laughed. I might cut you a deal. You remind me of my dad's old friends, tough as nails, but appreciate good work. Careful, boy. I might take offense at old. She winked. But if you're going to cut me a deal, maybe I can bribe you with lunch. Or dinner, depending on how long you can stay. Part of me hesitated. Normally, after a job, I'd bolt. But the day was bright, and I had no urgent calls lined up. Plus, there was something comforting about Wilma's directness. Sure, I found myself saying. Dinner sounds nice. I'll pay you back by washing dishes. Her kitchen was a cluttered haven of mismatched plates, half-used paints, and recipe clippings from old magazines. While she rummaged for ingredients, I wandered into the living room again. This time, I took a closer look at the paintings. I saw landscapes of the shoreline in different seasons. Winter storms, golden summer afternoons, autumn leaves aflame. One large canvas was a portrait of a teenage girl with braided hair, her expression calm but watchful. I wondered if it was a daughter or granddaughter. Wilma's voice drifted from the kitchen. My husband Philip painted that one too. He was good at capturing a person's essence. I turned to find her carrying a tray of vegetables, setting them on a small table. Was she family? I asked gently. Her gaze flicked to the painting. My granddaughter. She was around your sister Mary's age when that was painted spirited girl off chasing her own path now. She sighed, only for a moment. Philip and I had a good run, but money and success weren't always kind to us or our kids. I understood the subtext, regret, distance, the passage of time. I knew about that kind of thing, how heartbreak could wedge itself between family members. We worked together prepping a simple meal, chicken, roasted potatoes, fresh peas. The conversation flowed easily. She asked about my siblings, so I told her just a little. Allison's medical pursuits, Sharon's writing, Lane's fishing obsession, Mary's artistic streak. That's a lot on your shoulders, Wilma observed, slicing potatoes with surprising dexterity. You're still so young yourself. I shrugged, stirring the chicken in a pan. I grew up fast. Been that way for a while. She didn't pry deeper, sensing the edge in my voice. Instead, she steered the topic to her love for painting, how she missed the energy of a busy house. When my husband was alive, we constantly entertained guests or clients who wanted portraits. After he passed, the house went quiet, sometimes too quiet. The last words lingered in the air, heavy with unsaid meaning. We lapsed into a peaceful hush as the food sizzled and the kitchen filled with comforting aromas. Outside, I glimpsed the lake shimmering through the window, a backdrop of quiet majesty. Dinner itself was surprisingly cozy. We ate at a small wooden table set by a window. Wilma, sipping tea instead of wine, told me stories about her youth, how she'd ended up near Good Heart because Philip fell in love with the coastline's inspiration for his art. People said we were crazy, living so far from the city, she mused, but we made it our own little world. Her stories had a soothing effect. For once, I wasn't thinking about overdue bills or the shadow of betrayal that loomed over my family's past. Instead, I found myself actually enjoying a meal. We talked about the local wildlife, how she once nursed an injured fawn back to health. At one point, I accidentally spilled a bit of gravy, and she teased me about my lacking table manners. It felt almost normal, like I was visiting a quirky relative rather than a client. Afterward, I insisted on cleaning up. As I stood at the sink, scrubbing plates, Wilma joined me with a dish towel. She studied me with a mixture of curiosity and affection, reminding me a bit of how Dad's old friend Mr. Carter used to look at me like I was a puzzle they wanted to solve. You know, she said softly, you've barely charged me for the parts and labor. Don't think I haven't noticed. I shrugged, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. Honestly, the job was simpler than I expected. The boiler was old but fixable. She tapped a plate against the sink's edge. Don't shortchange yourself, kid. People who do good work deserve fair pay. Her directness made me smile. I'll keep that in mind. Before I left, she asked if I'd come back in a few days to check the system again, maybe handle small issues around the house. It's just me here, she admitted. Hard to lug tools around when you're my age. I hesitated only a second. Sure, I can fit you in. You call, I'll come. She patted my shoulder. Good. There might be a fresh pie in it for you next time. You do like pie, don't you? Who doesn't? I laughed. Thanks again for dinner. Driving away felt odd, like I was leaving a safe harbor. My phone buzzed, and it was Sharon texting that Mary had been in a sulky mood all day. Probably normal teenage drama. I realized I'd stayed at Wilma's longer than planned, yet it didn't bother me. The quiet comfort of her house somehow made me feel more alive, as though I'd glimpsed a life that didn't revolve around tension or heartbreak. That night, while Allison quizzed Lane on geography at our battered kitchen table, and Mary sulked in the corner, I found myself replaying Wilma's stories in my head. She'd seen her share of troubles, I was sure, but she carried herself with a certain grace. Maybe this was a stepping stone for me, too, a chance to do plumbing in a place that inspired something bigger, beyond the day-to-day grind. I drifted off to sleep with the memory of Wilma's smile and the aroma of dinner lingering in my mind. For once, I felt no urge to rush or worry. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more plumbing chores. But I had a standing invitation to a house by the lake, a promise of something that felt a bit like hope. 2 days after that cozy dinner at Wilma's, chaos erupted at home again. Mary, now 15, had snuck off in the middle of the afternoon with a couple of local troublemakers known as the McDougal brothers. I'd heard rumors about their reckless antics, speeding, underage drinking, the works. The minute Sharon realized Mary was gone, she bombarded my phone with frantic texts. I cut short a routine plumbing job and raced home, my stomach twisted with both anger and dread. Mary had been stable for a while, but I knew she still carried scars from our earlier years. That rebellious spark flared whenever she felt caged. When I arrived, Sharon paced in the front yard, fuming. She took off around noon with those McDougal idiots. Lane's worried sick. Allison's at the clinic. I tried calling Mary's phone, no answer. I clenched my jaw. Any idea where they went? Someone said they saw them drive toward the old gravel pit. God knows what for. Groaning, I jumped back into my truck. Sharon offered to come along, but I told her to stay with Lane. I peeled out onto the main road, heart pounding. The old gravel pit was a known hangout for rowdy teenagers who wanted privacy from prying eyes. Part of me recalled how, at Mary's age, I was dealing with a different brand of chaos protecting siblings from the men our mother brought home. I'd hoped Mary wouldn't chase that same darkness now, but maybe we don't always outrun our past. Sure enough, as I neared the gravel pit's dusty clearing, I spotted a battered blue sedan that had to belong to one of the McDougals. I pulled up behind it, dust swirling in the mid-afternoon sun. Music blared from cheap speakers, and I could see figures perched on the trunk, smoking. My pulse hammered. I recognized Mary's lean frame in a worn hoodie. 2 older teen boys flanked her, posture cocky, beer cans in hand. I climbed out of the truck, slamming the door. "Mary!" I shouted over the music. "Get in the truck! Now!" She jerked around wide-eyed, then folded her arms in defiance. One of the McDougal brothers, a big guy with a smug grin, sneered at me. "Hey, man, we're just hanging out. No harm done." I glared at him. "She's 15. You're older. This is harm enough." Mary bit her lip, looking torn. "Davis, stop embarrassing me. I'm not a kid. I can handle myself." "Not out here, you can't," I snapped. "We've been through too much for you to throw caution away. Now get in the truck." The second McDougal piped up with a mocking laugh. "Chill, we're not kidnapping her." My rage spiked. I marched forward, grabbing Mary's arm not roughly but firmly enough to show I wasn't messing around. She yanked free, eyes blazing. "Why can't you let me breathe, Davis?" "Because the last time I let you breathe, we nearly lost you to trouble." My voice shook. "I'm not letting that happen again." Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of a beer can someone crushed underfoot. One of the guys stepped forward, posture threatening. "Back off, man. She wants to be here." I stood my ground, recalling that pipe wrench incident from years ago. The memory stoked a fierce protectiveness inside me. "She's not staying," I said coldly, "and you don't want to test me on this." Mary's face twisted with frustration, but I saw the flicker of hurt beneath. After a tense beat, she shoved her way past the McDougal brothers and stomped toward my truck. I didn't bother with further words. Once she was in the passenger seat, I reversed out of the gravel pit, ignoring the jeers behind us. We drove in strained silence for a few minutes. Finally, Mary let out a shaky exhale. I wasn't doing anything bad, Davis. Just needed some air away from the house. And they said they'd drive me back. I cast her a sidelong look. They're known for trouble. I won't lose you to it. She huffed, tears of anger forming. You treat me like a baby. I'm old enough to make my own choices. Maybe. But your choices can drag you down a path you'll regret. My voice softened. Mary, I know you're restless. I was too at your age. But sneaking out with those guys? That's a shortcut to heartbreak. She didn't reply, just stared out the window. Back at the house, Sharon and Lane hovered by the door, relief etched on their faces. Mary stormed inside without a word, slamming her bedroom door. Lane gave me an anxious look, so I mustered a reassuring smile, but inside I felt the weight of worry. No matter how hard we tried to hold it together, old wounds still bled. Later that evening, while Mary sulked in her room, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. Wilma's name lit up the screen. Her voice was calm but insistent. Davis, can you stop by tomorrow? I have a little project that needs a plumber's eye. I'll pay you fairly, of course. My shoulders relaxed at the idea of escaping the tension at home. Yeah, I can come by in the afternoon. Next day, I arrived at Wilma's place. She greeted me with a gentle smile, guiding me to her kitchen sink, which dripped incessantly. I replaced a worn washer, fiddled with some corroded fittings. As I worked, she noticed my tense expression. You look weighed down, boy. Care to unload? Normally, I kept personal stuff private, but Wilma's concern felt genuine. With a sigh, I recounted the basics. Mary's restlessness, how I'd found her hanging with the McDougal brothers. I didn't dive deep into our family's past, but Wilma caught the undercurrent. She eyed me thoughtfully. Sometimes teenagers need an outlet for their anger or creativity. Mary might have more inside her than she knows how to handle. Her gaze flicked to a painting on the wall, a swirl of colors that hinted at hidden storms. I secured the faucet, wiping my hands on a rag. Yeah, Mary used to draw a lot. Lately, it's all surliness and pushing limits. Wilma nodded. Bring her here on Sundays. I've got spare art supplies, half-finished canvases. If she wants an outlet, I can offer her that. Surprise flared in me. I appreciate the offer, but Mary's not exactly warm to new people. She might just blow it off. She gave me a wry smile. I'm old, dear, not fragile. I can handle a stubborn 15-year-old. And if she has talent, I'll do my best to foster it. Her confidence made me grin. I pictured Mary stomping around, cursing under her breath, while Wilma calmly handed her a paintbrush. It was a strangely beautiful image. Okay, I said at last. I'll try to bring her. No promises. Wilma clapped her hands lightly. That's settled then. You're not just my plumber now, Davis. You're my partner in crime. We'll coax that girl away from trouble if we can. As she saw me out, she pressed some folded bills into my hand for the sink repair. When I tried to protest that it was too much, she shushed me. I told you I pay fair. Don't shortchange yourself. That small gesture warmed me. I thought about Mary's rage, how the McDougals loomed like a bad omen. Maybe a gentle push from Wilma's guidance could keep Mary from spiraling further. On the drive home, I rehearsed how to propose Wilma's Sunday art invitation. Mary might laugh in my face, or she might find exactly what she needed in Wilma's paint-splattered world. But I had to try. If saving Mary meant forging an unlikely alliance with a feisty old painter, so be it. It felt like a step forward, like a faint glow in the darkness, offering hope that not every story of heartbreak had to end in tragedy. Convincing Mary to visit Wilma proved easier than expected. She scoffed at first, but when I casually mentioned that Wilma had high-quality art supplies and wasn't the type to nag, Mary's eyes flickered with interest. So on Sunday morning, we drove out together. She spent most of the ride with her headphones in, staring at the passing trees, but at least she'd agreed to come. Wilma welcomed us at the door, grin bright as ever. You must be Mary, she said, extending a hand. Mary hovered, glancing around at the myriad paintings. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Eventually, she shook Wilma's hand, mumbling a polite hello. I've set up a corner in the back room, Wilma told her, with paints, Brushes, whatever you fancy. No pressure. You can just doodle if you like. Mary nodded, a flicker of curiosity replacing her scowl. Without a word, she followed Wilma toward a studio at the rear of the house. I lingered, listening as Wilma's voice trailed off, explaining different types of paint. Maybe this would actually work. Before I could relax, I heard footsteps on the porch. The door swung open, and a woman stepped inside, balancing a small tote bag. She had sandy blonde hair, pulled into a loose ponytail, and wore casual hospital scrubs under a light jacket. I froze, not expecting company, and she seemed equally surprised to see me. "Oh, sorry," she said, flushing slightly. "I didn't realize Gran had another visitor. I'm Erin." She set the bag down, stepping forward with an easy smile. Gran. Erin. This had to be Wilma's granddaughter. My mind scrambled for words while my heart did an odd thump. She was around my age, maybe a bit younger, and the way she carried herself confident yet warm made me feel an unexpected jolt of something. "Davis," I managed, holding out a hand. "I'm Wilma's plumber. Well, sort of. She asked me to check on some repairs." She shook my hand, her grip firm. "I see. Plumber/handyman, I guess. I'm a nurse at the local hospital. Well, partly local, I split shifts between Petoskey and somewhere downstate." The conversation felt oddly intimate, like we were old acquaintances meeting after a long separation. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I came to bring Gran her medication, do a quick check on her vitals. She can be stubborn about seeing doctors." I smiled, remembering Wilma's self-assured attitude. Sounds about right. Her eyes flicked to the paintings. She and Grandpa filled these walls with so many memories. Sometimes I forget how impressive it is until I come back. There was a tinge of nostalgia in her voice, reminding me of the longing I often felt about my own lost father. Must be nice, having that legacy. She nodded softly. "It is, though Gran can be a handful. She hates admitting she needs help." Then she jerked her chin toward the back room. "Is Mary your sister?" I confirmed. "She's here to do some painting with Wilma, trying to keep her out of trouble." I grimaced, realizing how blunt I sounded, but Erin's amused grin told me she wasn't offended. "Trust me, I get it. I was a handful at 15, too, especially after my dad." She broke off, clearing her throat. "Anyway, teenagers have a way of testing boundaries. Good on you for guiding her." Before I could ask about her own father, Wilma emerged, motioning us over. "Erin, dear, did you bring that blood pressure cuff? I've been feeling a bit lightheaded lately, though your presence might perk me up." Erin rolled her eyes fondly. "Gran, you could perk up a funeral parlor if you wanted." She grabbed the tote bag and stepped over, glancing back at me. "Nice to meet you, Davis." "You too," I said, and for a moment I couldn't help but notice how bright her eyes were, a warm hazel that drew me in. Something in my chest fluttered, the same way it did when I first stood in Wilma's living room of paintings. Hope, maybe, or the sense that life held surprises we never saw coming. After Wilma and Erin disappeared into another room, I wandered toward the back to check on Mary. She was already absorbed in a large canvas, her posture stiff at first. Wilma had set out charcoals, paints, and a blank sheet pinned to an easel. I lingered in the doorway, not wanting to intrude, but from behind, I could see her shoulders slowly relax. The swirl of black lines on the paper suggested some inner turmoil finding release. When she spotted me, she didn't scowl. She just nodded once, almost a silent thanks for bringing her here. I took that as a good sign. Let her create. Let Wilma's quiet guidance do the rest. I slipped back to the living room and found Erin returning from checking Wilma's vitals. "All good?" I asked. She shrugged, taking off her stethoscope. Her blood pressure's a bit high, but she swears she feels fine. I suspect she just wants me around more often. A soft smile touched her lips. In that pause, our eyes met again. Something crackled, an unspoken awareness that we were two strangers standing in a house brimming with paintings, both dealing with complicated families. My pulse quickened for reasons I couldn't quite name. I'd grown used to living in my siblings' orbit, rarely thinking about my own future. Meeting someone like Erin felt like stepping onto unfamiliar terrain. We made small talk about the house repairs. She teased me about the dusty old boiler. I teased her back about Wilma's refusal to take medical advice. Each exchange felt natural, easy, as though we were picking up a conversation from the day we were born. Eventually, she glanced at her watch. I have a shift starting soon in Petoskey. Gotta drive back. Outside, the midday sun filtered through tall pines. She walked me to my truck, or maybe I walked her to her car. It was all a blur. Before we parted, she paused. I'll probably be back this weekend. Maybe I'll see you around? My brain stuttered. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if Wilma needs more repairs, or if Mary's still, painting. She laughed, a gentle sound that fluttered like wings in my chest. Take care, Davis, and thanks for helping Gran. She's stubborn, but she appreciates it. Then she slid into her car. I stood there for a moment, feeling like an awkward teenager despite being 25. A smile tugged at my lips. I forced myself to head back inside, where Wilma was rummaging through a closet, mumbling about a leaky window frame I might fix. The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant haze. Mary spent hours painting, occasionally muttering to Wilma about color mixing. Wilma quipped about me being too tall to reach certain shelves and forced me to fix a squeaky cabinet hinge. My mind kept drifting to Erin, her warm eyes, that fleeting connection. By the time we left, Mary clutched a charcoal sketch, more subdued than when we arrived, but with a small glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Wilma pressed a plastic container of cookies into my hand, telling me to share them with my siblings. But keep 2 for yourself, she joked. You earned them. Driving home, Mary turned the radio low, a sign she was in a decent mood. Every so often, she would glance at the canvas or recheck the charcoal lines on the paper. I didn't press her for details. I sensed she was processing something big. My thoughts, meanwhile, pinged between relief for Mary and a fluttering curiosity about Erin. That fleeting spark threatened to become a steady glow in my mind. A first glimpse of possibility, like one of Philip's paintings capturing the sunrise on Lake Michigan, promising a new day, a hope we'd almost forgotten existed. I woke early that Sunday, nerves prickling in my stomach. Mary trudged into the kitchen, hoodie half-zipped, eyes still heavy with sleep. She didn't scowl when I told her we'd be heading to Wilma's place in an hour progress, I supposed. We set off mid-morning, driving through the crisp air toward Good Heart. The roads were clear, but the wind carried a faint bite that hinted at winter not too far away. Mary stared out the passenger window, earbuds jammed in. She'd done this every Sunday for a few weeks now, tagging along to Wilma's for painting lessons. And though she acted sullen at home, I noticed a subtle shift in her. She wasn't storming off with the McDougal brothers or lashing out at me. Maybe Wilma's quiet influence was helping. We arrived to find Wilma on her porch, bundled in a bright shawl. You two get inside, she said, tapping the side of her mug. I've got coffee made, and I've set up Mary's station in the studio. Her voice carried that usual non-nonsense cheer, but I detected an undercurrent of tiredness. She'd never complain, though too stubborn for that. Mary glided past her, muttering a greeting, and vanished into the back room. Wilma shot me a sympathetic look. She's got a spark in her eyes today. Even if she hides it, I can tell. I shrugged, though relief fluttered in my chest. I hope so. Leaving Mary to her painting, I joined Wilma in the living room, sipping coffee while flipping through an old magazine. She teased me about my scuffed boots, claiming it looked like I'd wrestled a wild boar on the way over. I smirked, shaking my head. These small moments of normalcy felt precious, like a break from all the stress waiting back at our cramped rental house. Sometime later, Mary called Wilma into the studio. They spoke in hushed tones, the occasional sound of a paintbrush scraping canvas. I heard Mary's voice rise once, exasperated, and Wilma's patient response. It reminded me of how Dad had handled me or Sharon in the old days, firm but understanding. With them busy, I stepped outside to fix a broken gate latch Wilma mentioned earlier. The sun was strong enough to warm my shoulders, even with the chilly breeze. Standing there, looking out at the shimmering lake, I felt a pang of longing, though for what, I couldn't quite say. Maybe for simpler times, or maybe for something I'd never even had, a stable home, a sense of belonging. Just then I heard crunching on the gravel driveway. Turning, I saw a familiar SUV pull up. Erin hopped out, wearing jeans and a casual jacket, her sandy blonde hair braided to one side. My heartbeat stumbled. We'd only crossed paths a couple more times since that first day, but each meeting lingered in my mind like a pleasant echo. "Hey," she greeted, slinging a small tote bag over her shoulder. "Gran said Mary might be here again, so I decided to stop by. I'm off work today." Her warm smile sent a flicker of something through me, hope, or maybe anticipation. I cleared my throat. "Wilma's inside. I'm out here playing handyman." She surveyed the gate latch I was fiddling with. "Need a second pair of hands?" I grinned. I won't say no. We worked side by side, exchanging easy chatter about her hospital shifts, my plumbing jobs, and the small drama of daily life. A handful of times, our arms brushed. Each contact felt charged in that subtle, uncertain way. Eventually, the latch was secure again, and we stepped back to admire our handiwork. She brushed dust off her palms, beaming. "Teamwork," she joked, eyes crinkling. "Good to know we can tackle a gate if the medical or plumbing fields ever fail us." I laughed, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. We'd conquer the world, one broken latch at a time. Before the moment could twist into awkwardness, Wilma's voice called out from the porch. "You two done flirting with my gate?" She wore a teasing grin, and Erin rolled her eyes in mock embarrassment. Erin followed Wilma inside, presumably to help with some task, while I lingered to gather my tools. My cheeks felt warm. It was ridiculous me, a grown man acting like a shy teenager. But something about Erin disarmed me. I wanted to ask more about her life, her family, how she handled the stresses of being a nurse, maybe soon if courage let me. I headed back in to find Mary finishing a charcoal sketch. It showed a half-finished figure standing against a swirl of clouds, dark, dramatic lines, like a storm was about to break. Wilma stood behind her, gently praising the shading technique. Mary's shoulders relaxed at the compliment. Erin perched by the doorway, watching with quiet admiration. When Mary noticed Erin, she gave a curt nod. I suspected Mary was still wary of new people, but at least she wasn't snapping. That was progress, too. By late afternoon, Mary had a decent start on her painting. She cleaned up the brushes, Wilma guiding her on proper rinse techniques, apparently a big deal in the art world. I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, only to have Erin join me again. The sun was dipping low, turning the lake into a canvas of gold and pink. We chatted about nothing in particular. The color of the sky, a new restaurant that had opened in Petoskey, how sweet Wilma's old cat was even though I hadn't seen it yet. Underneath the casual words, an unspoken pull made me want to keep talking to her forever. Eventually, Mary called from the porch, her bag of art supplies slung over a shoulder. "Ready to go, Davis? I want to show Sharon the painting." I nodded, shooting Erin a quick smile. "Guess I better get her home." Erin's gaze held mine for an extra second. "I'll be back next weekend. Maybe I'll see you around?" "Sure," I said, throat tight, a swirl of excitement mixing with fear. "I'll be here, presumably fixing something else Wilma's identified." She laughed softly. "Good. Take care, Davis." We piled into the truck, Mary in the passenger seat cradling her sketch pad. As we pulled away, I glanced in the mirror. Wilma and Erin stood side by side on the porch waving goodbye. My heart felt oddly full and simultaneously as though it was missing something I couldn't name. Mary was silent most of the drive, but she didn't blast her music. Maybe that was her own quiet way of thanking me. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying the day. Wilma's gentle mentorship, Mary's grudging acceptance, Erin's bright eyes in the afternoon sun. It felt like the start of something bigger, a promise that maybe my family's wounds could heal and that I might find a little grace myself. I drifted off with that hopeful thought echoing in my mind. A couple of weeks later, Wilma surprised us all by inviting my siblings and me to her house for a special Thanksgiving meal. She called it a practice run, since she didn't trust the local diners' takeout dinners. I suspected she just wanted to see us all under her roof, but I didn't question it. At home, we rarely had the space or peace to celebrate anything properly. When we arrived that late afternoon, the sky was gray, the wind sharper. A quick flurry of snow dusted the pines. Wilma greeted us with warm smiles, guiding us into a living room rearranged to accommodate a modest feast. A few old vinyl records leaned against the coffee table, the titles smudged with age. My siblings Allison, Sharon, Mary, and Lane spread out, exclaiming over the artwork on the walls or offering to help in the kitchen. Erin was there too, sporting a cozy sweater and fuzzy socks. She and I exchanged shy smiles. Neither of us openly acknowledged the spark that had grown over our occasional visits, but it hovered between us like a quiet secret. She helped Wilma baste the turkey, while Mary hovered near the studio area, itching to finish a painting. Lane fiddled with the record player, marveling at the old technology. As darkness settled outside, snow blew in erratic gusts, piling along the edges of the porch. Wilma joked that we might be snowed in if the weather got worse. I wouldn't have minded an excuse to linger. My siblings, too, seemed relaxed, no arguments, no tension. Even Mary, though still guarded, was calmer in Wilma's presence. Dinner was simple but hearty. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, some vegetables, and Wilma's famous cranberry sauce. We gathered around a makeshift dining setup in the living room, plates balanced on our laps or on small TV trays. Conversation flowed easily about trivial things. Sharon's short stories, Lane's fishing misadventures, Allison's near completion of certain medical coursework. Erin described a chaotic night shift at the hospital, comedic in hindsight. Somewhere near the end of the meal, Wilma flipped on the old record player. A jazzy tune crackled to life. She flashed a mischievous grin. "No point letting dust settle on these records," she declared. "Who wants to dance?" My siblings shared uncertain looks. But Wilma, unbothered by any reluctance, gently coaxed me to my feet. "Come on, Davis, show these youngsters how it's done." She recalled I'd once mentioned my father taught me some basic dance steps long ago. A wave of nostalgia hit me. Memories of dancing in our living room as a kid with Dad, back when life was less complicated. My throat tightened, but I forced a grin. "All right, but I'm rusty." Wilma put on a slower tune with a steady beat. Lane cheered, then teased me mercilessly. I accepted Wilma's lead, stepping carefully around the furniture. She laughed, light on her feet despite her age. "Not half bad, kid. The ladies should be lining up for you." Then, in a subtle move, she nudged me toward Erin, who stood to the side, giggling at our show. Feeling a rush of nerves, I turned to Erin, hand extended in an awkward invitation. She hesitated, cheeks coloring, but stepped forward. The music shifted to something softer. We moved tentatively, a slow sway in the center of the living room. My siblings clapped or teased, but the noise faded to a hum. All I felt was Erin's warmth under my palm, the soft rhythm guiding us. Her gaze locked on mine, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two in the room. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she heard it. She smelled of subtle floral soap or shampoo, a gentle scent that calmed my jittery mind. Our steps were small, half dancing, half standing still, but it was enough to spark 1,000 unspoken questions. Was this right? Could we find something real here, after all the pain in both our families? The song ended, replaced by a more upbeat tune. We slowly broke apart, applause echoing around us. I managed a sheepish grin, stammering a quiet thanks. Erin just smiled, eyes shining. Neither of us said a word about the moment, but it settled in my chest like a promise. Before we could catch our breath, Wilma's ancient landline rang with a shrill tone. She excused herself, hobbling over to answer. From her expression, it wasn't good news. "It's your stepfather," she mouthed to Erin, covering the receiver. Erin's face tightened. She disappeared into the hallway to speak in hushed tones, leaving me with a sense of unease. My siblings resumed chatter, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But I noticed Mary's gaze flicking to me, concerned. Lane fiddled with the record player again, starting a new track, though more subdued than before. After a few minutes, Erin returned, tension rippling in her posture. "Everything okay?" I asked softly, guiding her away from the others. She sighed. "Stepdad's complaining about some property issues, something about Gran's land. He thinks she's too old to manage it properly. It's complicated family stuff." Her eyes flickered with frustration. "I'd rather not discuss it now, though. Let's focus on tonight, yeah?" I nodded, empathy churning in my gut. I couldn't help but recall my own vow to protect Wilma from any external pressures. She'd given Mary an artistic sanctuary, given me a place to breathe. If someone tried to bully her off her land or manipulate her well, I wouldn't stand for it. The resentment from my past simmered beneath the surface, a reminder of how betrayal had once torn my family apart. The rest of the evening carried a bittersweet note. We cleared plates, told more stories, even coaxed Lane into a clumsy spin on the makeshift dance floor. Wilma watched with watery eyes, like she was cherishing every second. Outside, snow piled high, the wind rattling the windows. For a time, we forgot about the world's troubles, lost in music and companionship. When it came time to leave, Erin helped me gather leftovers into foil-wrapped containers for my siblings. She lingered by the porch, casting a glance at me. I opened my mouth to say something, maybe about how I appreciated dancing with her, or how that phone call from her stepdad worried me. But words tangled. Instead, I brushed an errant snowflake from her hair, eyes locked for a beat that felt far too short. "Thanks for tonight," she murmured, voice trembling just enough to make my heart flip. It meant a lot. To me, too, I managed. We parted with a mutual, unspoken question. I could taste it in the cold air. What happens next? Our families both carried baggage, secrets, wounds that might resist healing. But maybe, for once, hope was stronger than heartbreak. The next few weeks passed with a tense undercurrent. Wilma continued welcoming Mary each Sunday, teaching her painting techniques. Erin visited intermittently, grabbing quick chats with me about hospital shifts or Wilma's general well-being. But a new source of friction emerged, the McDougal family. It started with a phone call from Callum McDougal, the eldest brother. He reached me through a business reference, claiming he had a lucrative construction contract needing plumbing. At first I thought, great, more clients. But then he mentioned it involved expanding a future resort near Goodhart land suspiciously close to Wilma's property lines. We agreed to meet at a local diner. Callum was older than me by a few years, dressed in an expensive coat that clashed with the scruffy working-class vibe I expected from the McDougals. He offered a handshake, his grin all too polished. "Heard good things about your plumbing work," he began, sliding a folded proposal across the table. I skimmed it, eyebrows rising at the large sum. It was big money for a plumber like me, enough to help pay my siblings' college expenses, fix our ailing house. But an uneasy feeling coiled in my gut. Callum leaned forward. "We're building a major resort. The developer wants it done right and on time. We're prepared to pay premium for a local plumber who can handle the scope. You in?" I swallowed. "It's near Goodhart, right? Are you sure locals are okay with a resort overshadowing the coast?" His smile tightened. "Locals will adapt once they see the tourist revenue. There's just one snag: some of the properties near the lake are under old ownership. We're negotiating, but we want everything lined up for when the land's available." A chill slithered down my spine. "You mean Wilma Anderson's land, don't you?" He shrugged, feigning ignorance. "She's part of it, yeah. She's old, got no real heirs around here. She'll sell eventually, or her family will handle it. It's the natural progression." My jaw clenched. I thought of how devoted Wilma was to that house, the studio full of paintings, the quiet dock overlooking the lake. Her entire life was in those walls. "She's not selling," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "She told me she has no interest in leaving." Callum exhaled through his nose as though dealing with a stubborn child. "People say a lot of things, but money talks. If you join us now, you'll be set. We'll supply the contracts, guaranteed. All I ask is you keep out of certain property disputes that has let Wilma realize on her own that it's time to move on." Anger flared. I recalled the night my father died, the betrayal that left him broken. The mere suggestion of letting Wilma be pushed from her home made my blood boil. "I can't do that," I said bluntly. "She's been good to my family. I won't help you run her out." Callum's grin vanished. He sipped his coffee, eyes cold. "I'm not asking you to run her out, just to do nothing. Maybe speak a little reason. She's an old lady clinging to the past. Sooner or later it'll be sold. If you're with us, you'll have a nice, safe gig. Otherwise—" He set his mug down. "Well, it'd be a shame if your reputation got tarnished among the bigger clients. Word of mouth can be tricky. Threats." My hands curled under the table. This was exactly the kind of intimidation Dad had hated, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You can keep your money," I muttered. "I'm not abandoning Wilma." Callum's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Crawford. The McDougals run a lot of construction around here. You'll regret this. I stood, heart pounding, tossed some cash for my coffee, and left. Outside, cold wind slapped my cheeks. Part of me wanted to storm back in and throw a punch, but Dad's memory held me in check. He'd taught me that real revenge came from protecting those we care about, not stooping to the enemy's level. A few days later, rumors started circulating that my plumbing quotes were overpriced, that I'd bungled jobs. Clients canceled appointments. My phone fell silent. I wasn't naive, I knew Callum was behind it. Meanwhile, Mary overheard from the local teens that the McDougall brothers bragged about making me cooperate. It stung. We needed the income, especially with Allison nearing full medical training. One afternoon, after dropping Mary at Wilma's, I found Erin in the kitchen, making tea. She offered me a worried look. "Gran told me you've been quieter than usual. Something wrong?" Exhaling, I slumped into a chair. Callum McDougall's after me to join some resort project near Wilma's land. He threatened my livelihood when I refused. Her lips pressed into a thin line. My stepfather's also been hounding me about Gran's land. Says she's too old to maintain it, that a development might be best. I keep telling him it's not his decision, but I suspect he has allies like Callum McDougall. A heavy silence settled. We locked eyes. Frustration mirrored between us. "Wilma's your grandmother," I said, voice raw. "If she doesn't want to sell, shouldn't that be final?" She nodded, tension in her jaw. "You'd think. But wealthy families get pushy. They talk about caretaker expenses, property taxes, all the ways an older relative is burdened. It's awful." I remembered the day I found Mary with the McDougalls. This was a deeper extension of that same sense of entitlement. Erin's eyes flashed with sadness. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. "Gran's strong, but she can't do it alone. I'm trying to fight for her, but it's complicated. Family politics." Her touch jolted something in me, a warmth that fought against the gloom. "You're not alone," I whispered, lacing my fingers with hers. We both froze at the contact, something electric passing between us. Outside the window, the lake shimmered coldly under gray skies. A clatter in the next room broke the moment Mary rummaging through paints. Erin gently withdrew her hand, cheeks flushed. "We'll figure it out," she said, voice shaky but determined. I believed her. If the McDougalls wanted a battle, they'd get one. They might smear my name in the local construction scene, but I'd keep fighting. I couldn't let Wilma lose everything she cherished, not after all she'd done for Mary for me. A silent vow formed in my mind. I'll protect her, no matter the cost. Things only got tougher as the weeks dragged on. My phone kept quiet except for smaller jobs from neighbors who trusted me enough to ignore rumors. Allison noticed my stress, offering to contribute some of her clinic pay toward household bills. That hurt my pride, but I let her help. Mary continued her painting sessions, strangely happier but also worried about me. I tried to keep my bitterness under wraps, no need to burden them further. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I decided to stop by Wilma's place. Mary had left earlier with Sharon, but I stayed behind to fix a leaky faucet for a client. On impulse, I texted Erin asking if she was around. She replied she'd be done with her hospital shift soon and could drop by. Night blanketed good heart by the time I arrived. I found Wilma snoozing in her living room armchair, classical music drifting softly from a radio. She stirred when I entered, gave me a weak smile, and muttered about feeling a bit under the weather. I offered to whip up some tea, which she accepted with a tired nod. I couldn't shake the concern that maybe the stress of land disputes was wearing her down, but I didn't push it. She'd never admit it anyway. A half hour later, Erin's SUV crunched up the driveway. She slipped inside wearing scrubs under a warm coat, stethoscope peeking from her pocket. We greeted each other quietly. No big grin or playful banter this time, just relief. Wilma excused herself to rest, leaving us in the dimly lit living room. We sat on the old couch, the lamp casting long shadows. My chest felt heavy, a swirl of resentment toward Callum and all those who threatened Wilma's peace. Erin picked up on my mood, eyebrows knitting. "Hey, talk to me. You look like a man carrying the weight of the world." I exhaled. I guess I kind of am. The McDougall family keeps undermining my plumbing business, and my siblings rely on me. Plus, I can't stand the thought of them forcing Wilma out. Erin's expression was a mirror of my anger. I know. My stepdad's probably backing the same project. They think money solves everything. But Gran's not for sale, I told them that. They don't listen. Silence stretched, thick with tension. Finally, she turned more fully toward me, eyes dark with empathy. Is there anything I can do? Maybe talk to some local hospital donors, see if there's an alternative. I managed a grim smile. You're already doing enough by supporting Wilma. I just feel like every time I stand against them, they dig deeper into my livelihood. It reminds me of how my mother's betrayal destroyed my dad. I refuse to let heartbreak win this time. Her gaze sharpened with curiosity. I don't know much about that, just bits and pieces from what Gran said about your family's troubles. Want to share? A lump rose in my throat. Part of me had avoided telling her the full story, but maybe it was time. I leaned back, staring at the painting-laden walls, recalling the day Dad collapsed, the anguish that took him from us. My dad died of a stroke when I was 12. He discovered my mom's affair that same night. The shock he never recovered. She tore the family apart, and he paid with his life. Erin's hand found mine again, no hesitation this time. Her face paled slightly, but she didn't look away. Davis, I'm so sorry. That's God, that's awful. I swallowed hard, hatred and sorrow mixing. I was just a kid, but I saw how betrayal can kill. That's why I can't stand bullies who force others into corners. I promised myself I'd protect my siblings, do whatever it takes to keep us safe. She squeezed my fingers. You shouldn't have had to grow up so fast. It's not fair. Life rarely is, I murmured. Then I glanced at her. What about you? You mentioned your mother and stepfather aren't exactly loving either. A flicker of pain crossed her features. I lost my dad young too, in an accident. Mom remarried, focusing on money and social status. She's hardly around. My stepdad, well, he sees Gran as an inconvenience. He invests big in developments, wants to liquidate Gran's property. She grimaced. So we're both dealing with heartbreak from parents who failed us. A soft hush fell as we absorbed each other's confessions. My pulse pounded. I realized how deeply I cared for Erin, her struggles, her determination. My hand, still entwined with hers, felt like an anchor in a storm. After a moment, she reached up, lightly brushing her fingertips over my cheek. Thank you for trusting me enough to share that. Heat flushed my face. I care about you, I admitted, voice trembling. Didn't plan on it, but I do. You've become important to me more than just Wilma's granddaughter. She exhaled shakily, relief dancing in her eyes. I care about you too, more than I expected. I know it's not simple with our families, but I want to see where this goes. Emotion stirred in my chest. Longing, fear, gratitude, all tangling together. We leaned closer, drawn by an unspoken force. My heart hammered as I braced for the moment. Our lips brushed softly, an uncertain yet undeniable kiss. It was tender, an exchange of all the questions we hadn't voiced out loud. We lingered there, warmth spreading through me like a balm for old wounds. When we pulled back, eyes locked, neither of us spoke. But something had shifted. Her breathing was unsteady, cheeks flushed. Mine probably matched. The hush of the living room felt intimate, safe. Finally, Erin whispered, We'll figure out the rest, right? I nodded, hope blooming despite the storm of external conflicts. Yeah, we will. We spent another hour talking, mostly about small things, her stories from the hospital, my siblings' antics, Mary's blossoming art. But the tension that once hovered between us was gone, replaced by an undercurrent of closeness I'd never experienced. By the time I stood to leave, we were both reluctant to part. Outside, the moon shone over the lake, its reflection dancing on the gentle waves. Erin walked me to my truck, offering a shy smile when I opened the door. We shared one last brief kiss under the cold night sky, then I drove off, heart pounding like a drumbeat of possibility. As I approached my house, the memories of heartbreak tried to creep in, the father lost, the mother's betrayal, the threats from the McDougals. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope that overshadowed the pain. Maybe, Just maybe the tragedies of my past wouldn't define my future. Not if I had the courage to stand up for Wilma, for my family, and for the quiet yet profound love I was beginning to share with Aaron. I could feel it in the air, some unspoken heaviness settling over Wilma's lakeside house. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The McDougals were still pressuring her to sell, and she'd been fending off phone calls from developers and other concerned relatives. But then her appetite faded, and she started looking paler. When she mentioned dizziness, Aaron insisted on taking her to the hospital for tests. That's how I found myself parked in the hospital lot one chilly afternoon, nervously pacing as Aaron emerged with Wilma in a wheelchair. The doctor's verdict was grim. Her cancer had advanced. She still refused to sell her house or move into any assisted living. In her usual fierce tone, Wilma declared, "I'll spend my days in my own home even if it kills me faster." Aaron's stepfather on the phone was none too pleased he thought it was time to manage Wilma's affairs. Aaron just rolled her eyes at his arrogance and wheeled Wilma to my truck. Back at the house, Mary hovered in the driveway, biting her lip. She'd grown protective of Wilma over these months of painting. She helped me carefully get Wilma inside, neither of us admitting we were scared. Wilma tried to brush it off. "Stop coddling me, children. I'm not a China doll." But her trembling hands told a different story. Later, once we settled her in a recliner with blankets and hot tea, Wilma sighed. "I wish they'd let me be. If I go, I go. But I won't sign my life away just because I'm sick." Aaron squeezed her grandmother's arm. "We'll fight for you, Gran. Don't worry." It was around dinner time when a knock rattled the front door. Expecting Sharon or Lane, I swung it open and felt my chest constrict. My mother, whom I'd kicked out years ago, stood there, hair disheveled, wearing an old coat. She looked thinner, older, her eyes darting anxiously past me. A lump of resentment lodged in my throat. "Hey, Davy," she said softly, as if the last near-decade of absence was no big deal. "Heard you been living around here. Can I come in?" Anger surged. "Mom?" My voice cracked, a twist of disbelief and fury. "What are you doing here?" She cast a glance over my shoulder and caught sight of Wilma in the living room, then Mary standing near the kitchen. "I need to talk," she whispered. "I'm broke, and well, I heard you might be able to spare some cash." I let out a hollow laugh, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door shut behind me, blocking her from Wilma's view. "You think after all these years you can just show up and ask for money?" She looked away, rubbing her palms. "You always were a good boy, taking care of your siblings, right? I'm still your mother." Anger threatened to choke me. Memories of Dad's death, her betrayals, the chaos she unleashed on our home. And now here she was, turning up like it was a minor inconvenience. "You lost the right to call yourself that when you walked out on us," I spat. "We've done fine without you." She bristled, eyes tearing up in a manipulative flicker. "Fine? Look at you, living off scraps, plumbing jobs canceled, your father's memory haunting you. You're one to judge me." My fists clenched at my sides. "I won't do this out here, and I'm sure as hell not letting you near Wilma when she's in this state." A wave of protectiveness surged. "Go away." But she didn't budge. "At least let me come back tomorrow, talk things through," she pleaded, voice shaky. "I've got nowhere else. If you refuse, maybe I'll just talk to the McDougals, see if they have money for certain secrets." My blood ran cold. "You blackmailing me?" She shrugged, lips trembling. "Not blackmail, just survival. Maybe they'd pay to know all the gory details of your father's meltdown, your role in it. I hate doing this, but I'm desperate, Davy." I stared at her in disbelieving horror. The mother I remembered was careless and manipulative, but this, threatening to sell Dad's story to those vultures. My stomach churned. "I can't deal with you now. Leave." She backed down the steps, her expression a twisted mix of regret and entitlement. "I'll be around," she muttered. "Think about it." She disappeared into the twilight, leaving me shaking. I stepped back inside. Mary's eyes were wide with worry. Who was that? "Wrong address," I lied, clearing my throat. She gave me a suspicious look, but didn't press. I wasn't ready to dredge up that old pain, especially not in front of Wilma, who was too frail to handle new drama. An hour later, Aaron noticed my mood. While Mary helped Wilma prepare for bed, Aaron gently pulled me aside. You're pale. Something happened? I swallowed, my gaze flicking to the door. My mother showed up. Her eyes widened. Seriously? Nodding, I mustered a bitter laugh. She wants money. Threatened to talk to the McDougalls about Dad's death if I don't help her. Erin's jaw tightened, a flash of anger lighting her features. That's vile. I slumped against the wall, exhaustion seeping into my bones. I can't let her near my siblings or Wilma. She'll just cause chaos, but I don't have funds to pay her off, and even if I did, I don't owe her anything. Erin rested a hand on my shoulder. You're right. She gave up her claim to you years ago. Don't let her guilt trip you. We'll figure out a way to handle this. Looking at Erin's determined face, I felt a flicker of gratitude. Thank you. I'm sorry you have to be tangled in my family mess. She squeezed my shoulder. We're in this together. Her words soothed me, at least for the moment. We parted for the night, me driving home with Mary dozing in the passenger seat. But the storm clouds were gathering, inside my head as much as in reality. Wilma's health was wavering, my mother's sudden reappearance threatened everything I'd built, and the McDougalls loomed with their money-fueled ambition. Somewhere along the ride, Mary stirred and asked, Did something happen with that person earlier? I hesitated, then gently said, Just an old ghost, Mary. I'll handle it. She blinked, apparently trusting me enough to drop the topic. The wind rattled the windows, as if echoing the turmoil in my chest. I could only hope I'd be strong enough to shield my loved ones from the next wave of betrayal. I didn't realize my mother's reemergence would coincide with another surprise. Mary quietly starting to date James McDougal, the youngest of the McDougal clan. Talk about a twist I never saw coming. It happened in the strangest way. One afternoon, I swung by the high school to drop off Mary's forgotten sketchbook. I found her chatting outside the art room with a boy around her age, dark hair, lean build. Their heads were close, her cheeks pink. A second later, she spotted me and tensed up like a guilty child caught sneaking cookies. I recognized him. James McDougal, rumored to be the nice one among his brothers. Still, the McDougal name brought my guard up. He gave me a polite nod. Hey, Mr. Crawford, he said, voice calm, no arrogance. Mary mentioned you might drop off her sketchbook. Mary snatched the sketchbook from me, mumbling thanks, refusing eye contact. I frowned, not wanting to embarrass her. Hi, James, I managed stiffly. He shifted awkwardly. I know our families aren't on the best terms, but Mary and I, we share the same art elective. I like her drawings. Mary shot him a warning glare, cheeks blazing. I sighed, deciding not to cause a scene in the hallway. We'll talk at home, I told her quietly. That night, Mary confessed she and James had been talking for weeks, bonding over art and music. She said he wasn't like the rest of his family, less arrogant, more thoughtful. She looked nervous, bracing for me to explode. Instead, I just closed my eyes, counting to 10. Mary, the McDougalls want to run Wilma off her property, I reminded her. James's father is part of that plan. Doesn't that concern you? She bit her lip. It does, but James doesn't agree with them. He hates how his father and brothers do business. He's kind. Kind or not, it felt like dancing on thin ice. But Mary was 15, and I recalled being her age, full of defiance. Maybe forbidding her would backfire, so I told her I'd keep an eye on things. She relaxed slightly, muttering, Thanks for not freaking out. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake my unease. The McDougalls had threatened my livelihood, and James was still a McDougal, no matter how nice he seemed. But if Mary found happiness or stability in their shared art passion, who was I to crush that? A week later, Mary came home from Wilma's session looking agitated. While I waited for details, she finally blurted out that James overheard a conversation between his father and Erin's stepfather. They'd been on speakerphone, discussing ways to force Wilma's hand, maybe through eminent domain claims or financial pressure. James was upset, said he wanted to tell me directly, but Mary insisted on delivering the news first. My temper flared, so now it wasn't just the McDougalls alone. Erin's stepfather was in cahoots, too. The betrayal cut deeper because I knew Erin was battling her family's greed. The thought of them conspiring behind her back boiled my blood. Mary's eyes glistened. James hates it. He told me he'll see if he can record any evidence. He wants to help you. I folded my arms, torn between gratitude and suspicion. He's risking a lot going against his own father. Why would he do that? She shrugged, fiddling with her paint-stained hoodie. Because it's the right thing. He cares about me, and he says he respects you, even if you don't trust him. My chest felt tight. I appreciate his honesty, but be careful, okay? If his father catches wind that James is siding with us. She nodded, subdued. I know. Erin, meanwhile, was caught in her own battles with her stepfather. She told me he'd been calling regularly, suggesting Wilma needed a real caretaker. That caretaker, he claimed, would eventually recommend selling the property to fund round-the-clock medical costs. Erin blew up at him, but he wouldn't back down. She confided in me, voice trembling. They're like a pack of wolves smelling blood in the water. Amid this storm, Wilma tried to keep painting, but her fatigue worsened. She'd sometimes doze off mid-conversation, leaving Mary worried sick. Aunt Christine, hearing rumors of Wilma's health crisis, offered to chip in financially for some in-home nurse visits. Wilma balked at first, but eventually accepted a short trial. That's how Trevor Stevens entered the scene. Trevor, mid-30s, soft-spoken, with a background in geriatric care, arrived at Wilma's place one morning carrying a discreet medical bag. He was quick to smile, respectful, and unafraid of Wilma's blunt attitude. He tested her vitals, recommended gentle exercises, and tactfully avoided the subject of property. I liked him right away. He was exactly what Wilma needed, someone who cared for her health rather than seeing her as an obstacle to development. Still, the tension around us crackled like static electricity. My mother's threats hovered in the background. The McDougal father and Erin's stepdad were scheming. Mary was smitten with James, torn between love and loyalty, and Wilma's strength waned. I spent my days working small plumbing gigs, my nights helping Mary study or trying to see Erin, who was equally stressed. We were all stretched thin, anticipating the next blow. On a quiet Tuesday, while Trevor ran a few tests on Wilma, Erin pulled me into the kitchen. Gran's stable for now, but it's only a matter of time before she needs more serious care, she whispered. She won't go to a facility, so maybe we can organize something at home. But who's paying for it? She paused, pain flickering in her eyes. Her children sure won't. My mother and uncle are long gone from this place. I raked a hand through my hair. We'll find a way. Aunt Christine chipped in for Trevor, right? Maybe Mr. Carter or a few neighbors can help raise funds. Wilma's done so much for everyone. Erin gave me a tired smile. You're too good, Davis. Her words comforted me, but a knot remained in my gut. The McDougals had deep pockets and political sway. If they ramped up their campaign, we'd be scrambling. Meanwhile, I still had to navigate my mother's looming shadow. She texted occasionally thinly veiled hints that she'd talk to the right people if I didn't pay. Each time, I fought the urge to smash my phone in fury. I felt like a dam on the verge of breaking, water pushing at every crack. But for Wilma's sake, I stood firm. For Mary, who blossomed through painting. For Erin, who was torn between her medical duties and her grandmother's fight. For my siblings, who counted on me not to repeat history by letting betrayal ruin another family. In quieter moments, I watched Mary and James talk in hushed voices outside Wilma's place. She'd show him a half-finished painting. He'd point out something encouraging. They'd laugh shyly. Despite my wariness, I saw genuine warmth there. Maybe it was a sign that not all McDougals were lost causes, or maybe we were all just living on borrowed time, waiting for the inevitable clash. Mid-December arrived with a bite in the air, the lake wind howling like an omen. While the rest of the world prepared for holiday cheer, we braced for another onslaught. Sure enough, Erin's stepfather launched a new tactic. Insinuating Wilma was mentally unfit to manage her property, he tried to file preliminary paperwork demanding she be placed under guardianship. The goal? Force a sale to cover her medical needs. Erin was livid, but Wilma refused to appear in court. I've got no patience for nonsense, she snapped, though her voice trembled with fatigue. Trevor Stevens offered a medical opinion that Wilma was indeed competent, though physically frail. That helped stall the legal push, but it was draining everyone's nerves. On top of that, the McDougal father ramped up local gossip. He claimed Wilma's house was unsafe, that the boiler was on its last legs, a lie since I'd fixed it months ago. He even spread rumors that Davis Crawford, meaning me, wasn't a legitimate plumber or that I was overcharging clients. My phone rang less and less. Bills piled up at home. Sharon considered dropping community college to work full-time, but I wouldn't allow it. One afternoon, I stood outside Wilma's garage, staring at the battered boards that needed replacing. Trevor Stevens parked his old sedan and ambled over. "She's resting," he said quietly. "We had a rough morning, some dizzy spell, and low blood pressure. She's stable now." I exhaled. "Thanks for sticking with her. I know the McDougal rumors can't be easy. They want people to think she's beyond help." Trevor nodded, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. "I've seen this before, wealthy folks leveraging an old person's failing health to grab property. Disgusting. But Wilma's got fight left. She's not signing anything." I studied him a moment. "You're a good caretaker, Trevor. Wilma's lucky we found you." A faint smile. "She reminds me of my grandmother, stubborn as a mule but kind." As we chatted, I spotted Mary across the yard, quietly painting the lake's winter light. James stood beside her, handing a thermos of hot cocoa. They looked so innocent in that moment, two teens bonding over art while the world outside threatened to devour everything. My heart clenched with a mix of fear and hope. Later that day, Erin showed up, wearing her nurse's uniform under a thick coat. "I swung by the courthouse," she muttered, letting me lead her inside. "Apparently my stepfather filed another petition, but the judge wants more evidence before granting guardianship. We have a little breathing room." I let out a relieved breath. Small victories. Still, the tension chipped away at us. Erin had dark circles under her eyes, and even Mary seemed subdued. Aunt Christine occasionally delivered groceries, but Wilma balked at letting her pay the big bills. Pride, or maybe old resentments, kept them at arm's length. Then, one frigid evening, the real blow hit. I lost the last of my mid-level contracts to a bigger plumbing firm. Rumors about me being unreliable or unlicensed did their damage. I returned from the final rejection to find Mary at the kitchen table. Flipping through an art magazine, James perched beside her. They both glanced up, alarmed at my defeated posture. "You okay?" Mary asked hesitantly. I tried to force a reassuring nod. "I'm fine. Just some work stuff." James cleared his throat. "Mr. Crawford, I know my family has a hand in making you lose business. I'm so sorry." He looked genuinely pained. "If it helps, I overheard Dad bragging that once Wilma's out, he'd bring you back on board, like some twisted reward for giving in. It's wrong." My anger simmered. "I'm not for sale, James. Neither is Wilma." He bobbed his head earnestly. "I know. I'll keep gathering whatever I can, a recording, documents. Maybe we can prove they're harassing her." Part of me wanted to refuse his help to protect him from his father's wrath, but if it could shield Wilma from a forced eviction, I had to consider it. "Just be careful," I murmured. As December dragged on, the emotional toll worsened. Lane, now 13, asked why I wasn't working as much. Sharon tried to pick up part-time hours at a bookstore. Allison juggled clinic shifts and her final medical exams, sometimes skipping meals to keep up. Even Mary's creative spark dimmed a bit, though she clung to Wilma's lessons and James's quiet support. And then there was Erin, who saw me teetering under the weight. One snowy night, she showed up at my door after her hospital shift, hair frazzled from the wind. We hadn't had real alone time in ages. She slipped off her coat, eyes full of concern. "Davis," she whispered, stepping close. "Let me take care of you tonight." I swallowed hard, exhaustion wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. We retreated to the dimly lit living room, where old pictures of Dad and my siblings lined the worn shelves. She sank onto the couch beside me, and I let my head fall against her shoulder. Silence enveloped us, punctuated by the distant hum of the heater. Her fingers threaded through my hair, offering comfort I desperately needed. Gradually, I turned to face her. Our lips met in a tender, lingering kiss and affirmation that we were in this fight together. The warmth of her body against mine pushed back the harsh cold of reality. For a moment, I forgot about all the chaos, the McDougals, my mother's threats, Wilma's decline. All that mattered was the gentle press of Erin's hand over my heart, the quiet promise that we could endure. We remained that way for a while, exchanging whispered confessions about our fears. She admitted feeling guilty that her own stepfather was part of this assault on Wilma. I confessed the shame of losing jobs and feeling powerless. In the hush of that living room, with snow pelting the windows, we found solace in each other. There were no graphic details or wild passions, just a raw, fragile closeness that could have been 18 if we let it. But we kept it tender, mindful of the world's eyes. By the time Aaron left, slipping back into the night, a thread of optimism glimmered in me again. Sure, we were battered, but not broken. The McDougals might tear at my business, my mother might blackmail me, and Wilma's health might waver, but we still had each other. There was power in that unity, and if they wanted a legal or emotional war, we'd stand firm even if it cost us everything. A few days before Christmas, everything boiled over. I was at Wilma's, installing a new safety rail Trevor recommended for the bathroom, when my mother barged in unannounced. She wore a strained smile, carrying a tattered purse clutched tight. Wilma was resting in a chair, Mary and James quietly painting near the window. Aaron, flipping through Wilma's medical charts, froze at the intrusion. I dropped my tools, heart hammering. "Mom, what are you?" She raised a hand, voice sickly sweet. "I'm here to see my son and grandchildren, if that's allowed. Isn't this the place you've been hiding out?" Mary stiffened, eyes wide. James retreated a step, sensing trouble. Wilma stirred, giving my mother a sharp once-over. "You must be Davis's mother," she said, tone clipped but polite. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here." Mother's gaze flicked around, calculating. She spotted the oxygen tank Trevor had left in a corner. "So the old lady's health is failing, huh? Might be wise for her to think about moving somewhere safer." She aimed a pointed look at me. "Wouldn't want another tragedy on your conscience." Rage flared. I stepped forward, voice shaking. "Stop! You don't get to waltz in and threaten us." She sneered, dropping the false facade. "I told you, Davy, I need money. If you can't spare it, maybe the McDougals will. They pay for information about Wilma's condition fuel for an assisted living push or a forced sale. I could also spill the beans on your dad's meltdown, how you were there, how my control snapped." "That's enough!" My voice echoed in the living room. Mary gasped, James protectively putting an arm around her. Aaron stood rigid by Wilma's side, lips parted in shock. Mother didn't back down. "You think you're above all this? You're just a plumber whose reputation is in tatters. Your father's dead because he couldn't handle my truth. And now you're repeating the cycle, clinging to a dying old woman. It's pathetic." A wave of heartbreak and fury smashed into me. I lunged forward, fists clenched, but Aaron's voice cut in, trembling. "Davis, wait!" She grabbed my arm. If she hadn't, I might have done something irreversible. I sucked in air, forcing myself to speak instead of lash out. "Get out!" I hissed, struggling to control my breathing. "You're not welcome here!" She threw up her hands. "Fine, but I'll be around. The McDougals aren't the only ones who see opportunity. Remember that?" With that final stab, she stomped toward the door. Suddenly, Wilma's voice, frail but firm, sliced through the tension. "Wait." My mother paused, glaring. Wilma stared her down. "I don't know you, but I've seen your kind before leeches who feed on others' misery. You won't find an easy meal here. If you threaten my family, yes, I said family again, you'll regret it." Mother scoffed, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Then she left, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mary trembled, tears on her cheeks. James hovered, unsure what to do. Aaron stroked Wilma's hand, checking her pulse out of habit. I stood there, body shaking, grief and anger swirling. Memories of Dad's final day assaulted me. My mother's cruelty, her twisted sense of entitlement, it all came crashing back. Something inside me shattered. Mary gently approached, eyes glossy. "Davis?" I couldn't speak. I just stumbled out onto the porch, desperate for air. Snow whipped around me, stinging my face. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps, Aaron's. She didn't say anything, just wrapped me in a hug from behind. My shoulders quaked as years of pain bled through the cracks. The wind howled, drowning out my ragged breath. Eventually, Aaron guided me to a porch chair. She knelt beside me, her own eyes misty. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Your mom, she's cruel. You didn't deserve any of that. I swallowed, throat raw. I've tried so hard to be nothing like her, to protect everyone, and she still uses Dad's death like a weapon. She took my hands. You're not her. You're a good man, Davis. You've kept your siblings safe, cared for Wilma, stood up to the McDougals. I know it hurts, but you're stronger than she'll ever be. A hollow sob escaped me. I let my head fall forward, forehead resting on Erin's shoulder. In that moment, all the revenge fantasies I'd harbored about punishing my mother or the McDougals felt empty. Real revenge was living honorably, refusing to let betrayal define me. But God, it hurt. After a while, the door opened and Mary peeked out. Her voice quivered. Wilma's okay, just shaken. James is helping calm her, and I'm sorry about Mom. I forced a nod. Not your fault. My mother had abdicated any claim to us a long time ago. Erin pressed a gentle kiss to my temple, a quiet reassurance. We'll get through this, she said. But right now, Wilma needs us. She's probably rattled, and we can't let her blood pressure spike. Pulling myself together, I stood. My knees felt weak, but Erin and Mary braced me. Together, we went back inside. Wilma was breathing raggedly, Trevor trying to soothe her. James hovered uncertainly. The atmosphere was heavy with shock. I knelt beside Wilma, grasping her frail hand. I'm so sorry, I whispered. She mustered a small smile. Don't be. Some fights can't be avoided. Then her eyes grew stern. But you must remember, you have something she can't take. The people who love you stand by you. My chest tightened. If only Dad were here to see that, to feel the difference love and loyalty can make. Instead, I carried his memory like a shield. Mother's reappearance may have shattered some illusions, but it also solidified my resolve. I wouldn't let her or the McDougals bulldoze Wilma, not after all she'd done for us. Outside, the storm raged, wind whipping icy snow across the lake's frozen surface. Inside, we gathered around Wilma, reaffirming our bond. Erin placed a comforting hand on my arm, Mary squeezed Wilma's shoulder. James kept a respectful distance, and Trevor checked Wilma's pulse. We were a fragile team, but we were a team nonetheless. If my mother wanted a war, she had it. If the McDougals wanted to force Wilma out, they'd face all of us. No more second-guessing, no more fear of secrets. Betrayal cut deep, but unity could be deeper. In that bleak winter twilight, I felt the flicker of hope that we might yet withstand the gathering storm. The hospital walls felt too white, too sterile, the fluorescents buzzing overhead. Wilma lay in a motorized bed, blankets tucked around her shoulders. She'd been admitted a few days prior when a dizzy spell turned into a sharp collapse. Tests confirmed what we already feared. Her cancer was spreading fast, and any invasive treatment would be high risk. When the doctor suggested palliative care in a facility, Wilma refused, unwavering as always. She had one request. Take me home, she said, voice raspy but firm. I'm not dying in this godforsaken place. Allison, who had nearly finished her nurse practitioner coursework, stood by me, arms folded. Trevor Stevens was there, Wilma's caretaker for the past few weeks, checking her vitals. Over the last few months, Trevor had become indispensable, offering a calm presence and medical know-how that clashed with the drama swirling around us. Now, he gently pressed a stethoscope to Wilma's chest, listening to her ragged breathing. She's stable enough for transport, Trevor said, quietly meeting my eyes. But she'll need constant care at home. Allison nodded. I can handle a lot of it. She'll need intravenous meds, frequent vitals checks, a bed with adjustable settings. Wilma huffed out a weak laugh. I don't care if you park me on the couch with pillows, child. Just get me out of here. A pang of sorrow caught in my throat. Even lying in a hospital bed, cheeks hollowed, Wilma's spirit hadn't dimmed. I forced a smile, brushing her hand. All right, Wilma. We'll make it happen. Outside the room, Erin waited, eyes rimmed red from exhausted tears. She'd fought her stepfather tooth and nail to keep Wilma out of a forced facility, citing patient autonomy. The man had gone behind our backs again, calling lawyers and McDougall contacts, but so far we'd held him off. How is she? Erin asked softly as I approached. I exhaled. Determined, we're taking her home. She's too weak to fight a legal battle from a hospital bed. Erin's shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank God. Let's hurry before my stepfather tries another stunt. The last 2 days had been brutal. The McDougals and Aaron's stepfather arranged a meeting to discuss finalizing development plans near Wilma's property. They wanted to expedite everything under the guise of helping pay for her care. We saw right through the lie. But with Wilma in the hospital, they smelled blood in the water. I'd been ignoring calls from Callum McDougall, who kept reminding me that siding with Wilma was suicidal for my career. I didn't care. My choice was made a long time ago. A few hours later, we navigated the labyrinth of discharge paperwork. Allison and Trevor coordinated a specialized transport vehicle that could handle Wilma's fragile state. I hovered anxiously, signing forms and triple-checking her new prescriptions. Mary had stayed behind at Wilma's house, prepping a spare bedroom under Trevor's instructions, while Lane and Sharon scurried around collecting supplies from the local pharmacy. Everyone pitched in, an unspoken vow binding us to see Wilma through this final stretch. Once the ambulance arrived at Wilma's property, the wind off the lake cut through our jackets, the cold biting. We helped situate her in the spare bedroom, really just a cozy den with wide windows facing the water. Wilma sighed with relief when the paramedics eased her onto the adjustable bed. "Home," she whispered, eyes fluttering as she took in the familiar paintings and scent of old pine. Trevor busied himself adjusting IV lines, hooking up oxygen. Allison directed the paramedics where to place the portable medical equipment. I found myself standing at the window, gazing at the frozen shoreline. The lake reflected the late afternoon sun in shards of silver and pink. Despite the tension from the property battles, I felt a surge of calm. Wilma was exactly where she wanted to be, where she needed to be. I glanced back to see Mary perched at Wilma's bedside, showing her a new sketch. James McDougall lingered near the doorway, quiet and respectful. He'd grown close to Mary, but we all recognized the potential fallout if his family discovered he was actively helping us. He risked a lot being here. Eventually, everyone drifted into the living room, giving Wilma space to rest. Aaron and I grabbed a moment in the hall, away from the controlled chaos. She brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead, her touch gentle. "We did it," she said softly, relief and worry mingling in her eyes. "She's out of the hospital." I nodded. "Yeah, but we're far from done. The McDougalls and your stepfather, they'll push again. They keep scheduling a final property meeting. They want Wilma to sign something." Her lips thinned. "They're obsessed. I've told them it's not happening, but they're playing the card of we need to finalize decisions for her estate if she's incapacitated." The frustration in her voice was palpable. "It's sick." I took her hand. "I won't let them storm in here. They'll have to go through me and the rest of us first." We shared a moment of quiet resolve before returning to help Trevor set up a rotating care schedule. Aunt Christine arrived mid-evening, toting a cooler of pre-made meals. She looked older than I remembered, worry lines marking her face. "I should have come sooner," she muttered, hugging me. "I'm sorry for the distance." I shrugged, swallowing bitterness from our complicated past. "You're here now. That's what counts." Christine, soft-spoken, helped Mary reorganize Wilma's art supplies. Lane hovered by the door, curious but shy. Trevor meticulously explained how to manage Wilma's oxygen and IV, leaving laminated instructions pinned on the wall. It was a flurry of planning and exhaustion, but a small warmth thrummed among us. We were united. As midnight approached, Wilma dozed, chest rising and falling with a rasp. Allison gently tidied the bedside table, ensuring water and meds were within reach. Trevor insisted we all grab at least a few hours of sleep in shifts. I lingered in the hallway, mind heavy with thoughts of Dad, of how I couldn't save him from heartbreak. This time, maybe I could honor his memory by giving Wilma the peace she deserved. Aaron approached, placing a light hand on my shoulder. "You should rest," she whispered. "You look dead on your feet." I gave a grim half-smile. "Can't help feeling it's not safe. The McDougalls might try something." She shook her head softly. "They'd be fools to break in here. We have enough witnesses, and Wilma's caretaker can verify everything. Relax for a moment for me." The thought of resting felt odd, but my body ached with fatigue. I let Aaron guide me to a small couch in the living room. She draped a worn blanket over me, and I sank into uneasy sleep. lulled by the soft hum of medical equipment from the den. That night I dreamed of Dad, standing at the end of a dock, silent wind rustling his hair. He gazed at me with sad eyes, as if asking if I'd learned from his tragedy. I tried to call out, but my voice died in my throat. Then the image shifted to Wilma, paintbrush in hand, beckoning me to guard the legacy she and Philip built. I woke to faint dawn light creeping through the windows. Mary was sitting cross-legged on the floor, nodding off with her sketchbook. James dozed in a corner chair. Aunt Christine must have gone to catch a nap in the spare bedroom. Trevor was still in the den, chatting quietly with Allison, who insisted on checking Wilma's vitals. And outside, that endless lake shimmered under the first glow of sunrise. We'd made our final choice. Wilma would stay at home, no matter the cost. The forces outside might still pound at our door, but for now she was safe, surrounded by the people she loved. Next would come the confrontation, the property standoff the outline predicted. But for a few precious hours we had peace. And in Wilma's steady, if frail, breathing, we found the determination to face whatever storm came next. Over the next week, Wilma's condition worsened faster than any of us wanted to admit. Even with Allison and Trevor providing round-the-clock care and Aunt Christine's helpful presence, she grew weaker daily. She'd slip in and out of awareness, drifting to sleep mid-sentence. Sometimes, though, she had moments of startling clarity, especially when Mary showed her new sketches, or James quietly read to her from an old poetry book. One crisp morning, the wind off Lake Michigan was calm for once, sunbeams dancing across the water. Wilma beckoned me close with trembling fingers. She seemed more alert, a fire glowing in her eyes. "Davis," she murmured, voice raspy, "I need to see the lake, one last time." My chest tightened. She'd barely been able to sit upright in bed, let alone move outside. But her gaze held unwavering resolve, the same fierce spirit I'd encountered months ago when I first fixed her boiler. I glanced at Trevor, who stood at the door, concern etched on his face. Aaron hovered beside him, lips parted in uncertainty. "You sure?" I asked Wilma softly, stroking her hand. "The doctor said—" She cut me off with a half-smile. "The doctor said I'm dying. That's no secret. Let me do it on my own terms. Carry me to the lakeshore if you must." Emotion lodged in my throat. "All right," I whispered. "Let's get you there." Mary and James cleared a path through the living room, carefully moving furniture. Trevor prepped a portable oxygen tank. Aaron checked Wilma's pulse, conferring with Allison on how best to manage her lines. Finally, we lifted Wilma. I cradled her in my arms, feeling how fragile she'd become. Her body was so light, as if the wind might snatch her away if I loosened my grip. She mustered a playful quip. "Don't drop me, plumber boy," earning a wet laugh from Mary, who trailed behind us. We stepped onto the porch. The lake stretched ahead, sunlight reflecting like shards of glass. Despite the cold, Wilma's expression softened, eyes bright with longing. Gently, I descended the steps, heading down a short path to the shoreline. Aaron held the oxygen tank. Mary and James hovered, offering blankets. Aunt Christine and Lane followed in hushed reverence, Sharon filming discreetly from a distance, capturing Wilma's last lakeside moment. By the water's edge, the sand was damp, dotted with small patches of ice. I found a flat rock to position Wilma on, bundling her in layers. Her breathing hitched, but she managed a trembling smile. "So beautiful," she murmured, tears glistening. "Philip and I used to watch sunsets here every evening. He'd paint while I read poetry. We'd argue about the color of the sky, silly things." An ache welled in my chest. Allison stood close, checking Wilma's IV drip, her own eyes wet. Trevor hovered near, ready if her oxygen dipped. Wilma turned her gaze on me, a weak chuckle escaping her lips. "You, Davis, remind me of Philip sometimes. Stubborn heart, kind soul." I swallowed, tears threatening. "I'm not half the man he was." "You're more," she whispered, fingers curling around mine. "You and Aaron. You remind me that life moves forward, and Mary, oh, Mary's blossomed. Your siblings, all of them fighting your own storms. I'm proud to have known you all." Mary stepped up with a small canvas. On it, she'd painted a rough but poignant portrait of Wilma, capturing her gentle wisdom and the sadness in her eyes. Wilma's breath caught when she saw it. "My dear girl," she murmured, tears slipping free. "You'll be a great artist. Don't let anyone stifle you." James slid an arm around Mary, offering silent support. Even from the corner of my eye, I could see Aunt Christine wiping tears. Lane sniffled, hunching his shoulders, while Sharon quietly took photos, wanting to preserve this bittersweet scene. After a few moments, Wilma's respiration faltered. I tensed, glancing at Trevor, who checked the portable oxygen gauge. She waved him off. "No fuss," she said weakly. "Davis, could you set me down on the sand?" My heart pounded. "Wilma, it's cold. Please," she cut in. "I want to feel the earth under me." Reluctantly, I lowered her carefully, letting her rest on a soft blanket that Mary spread out. Her eyes fluttered shut, the shoreline breeze catching her hair. Then, with trembling hands, she beckoned me closer again. "Here." From a small pouch she'd insisted on carrying, she withdrew 2 rings, one a modest band, the other Philip's wedding band. "Yours now," she rasped. "Protect Erin, love her like Philip loved me, and if Mary ever needs guidance, help her find her path." Tears burned my eyes. "Wilma, I can't." She pressed them into my palm. "You can. A part of Philip and me will live on through you, through your family." Her lips quirked, a final wry grin. "No arguments. Let an old woman have her way." Emotions overwhelmed me. I nodded, fingers closing around the bands. In the background, Erin stepped forward, kneeling, tears streaming. Wilma reached out, brushing a thumb across Erin's cheek. "You're my bright granddaughter. Fight for what matters. Don't let your stepfather's greed drown your compassion." Erin's whisper cracked. "I promise, Gran. I promise." The wind grew still. We all sensed Wilma's strength fading by the second. She gazed around, a distant warmth in her eyes. "My happiest memories are here by the lake, with Philip, with all of you. Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you, Davis, for giving me dignity in these final days." I tried to speak, but my voice caught. She closed her eyes, exhaling gently. I felt her grip go slack. Allison leaned in, checking for a pulse, tears falling freely as she whispered, "She's gone." A hush descended, broken only by the gentle lapping of the water. For a moment, time froze, grief wrapping around us like a heavy blanket. Mary sobbed into James's shoulder. Sharon set down her phone, tears streaking her face. Lane stared numbly at Wilma's still form. Aunt Christine murmured a shaky prayer. Trevor bowed his head, respecting the final hush, and Erin clung to me, trembling as heartbreak overtook her. I lifted Wilma's hand, the hush of her final breath echoing in my ears. She was gone. The woman who'd befriended me, saved Mary from rebellion, taught us about art and resilience she'd taken her last look at the lake. And yet, her presence seemed to linger, riding the breeze, mingling with the water's reflection. Eventually, I gently scooped her into my arms, tears rolling unchecked down my cheeks. We carried her back up the path, united by heartbreak and gratitude. Wilma had insisted on leaving life in her own way, her final breath spent at the shore she loved. Now it was up to us to honor that wish, to see her property remain free from the vultures circling overhead. As we crossed the threshold into the house, I felt a profound calm settle over me. Wilma was gone physically, but her spirit, like Philip's, lived on in the paintings, the memories, and the rings still clutched in my palm. She'd passed with the wind off the lake, leaving us the gift of her legacy. Our tears were a mix of sadness and a strange sense of peace. For once, a heartbreak concluded on its own terms, with love and family gathered at the water's edge. The day after Wilma's passing felt surreal. Family and friends trickled in, dropping off casseroles or flowers. Erin's stepfather and the McDougals might have wanted an immediate property sale, but we insisted on a small memorial, first Wilma's final farewell before any estate matters. We organized a modest gathering in the living room, her paintings on every wall, her art supplies still neatly arranged. It was intimate, with no grand speeches. Mary, eyes swollen from crying, read a short poem Wilma once loved. Sharon played a soft tune on a borrowed guitar. Lane fidgeted, tears glistening. As we wrapped up that quiet memorial, a sharp knock came at the door. Mr. Sage, a tall man with graying hair and a leather briefcase, introduced himself politely. "I was Wilma's attorney," he explained. "She asked me to handle her final wishes." A hush fell. Aaron's stepfather, who'd arrived uninvited, perked up from the corner, crossing his arms. Callum McDougal lurked behind him, wearing a smug grin. My stomach churned at their presence on such a solemn day, but Mr. Sage insisted the reading of the will be done promptly, at Wilma's request. We all found seats in the living room, tension thick enough to choke on. Mr. Sage set the briefcase on a side table, producing a sealed envelope. He skimmed an introduction, explaining Wilma had updated her will quite recently. Aaron shot me a curious glance. Wilma must have planned this behind the scenes. A wave of gratitude for Wilma's foresight washed through me. "In short," Mr. Sage began, voice calm and measured, "Wilma C. Anderson leaves her personal effects, such as paintings and household items, to be divided among her beloved granddaughter Erin and her chosen family members Davis Crawford and his siblings, at her discretion." Erin blinked, tears forming. The mention of chosen family stirred an ache in my chest. Meanwhile, Mary let out a shaky sigh of relief, presumably thinking how Wilma's paintings wouldn't be sold off. Then Mr. Sage cleared his throat. "As for the land, the house, and the surrounding acreage by Lake Michigan, Wilma has established a land trust in perpetuity. The property is not to be sold or developed for any private commercial use." He paused, allowing that to sink in. "Its usage shall be open to local artists, residents, and future generations, ensuring that the shoreline and Wilma's legacy remain protected." An uproar followed. Aaron's stepfather surged to his feet, face mottled with anger. "That's preposterous! She was senile! She had no right, my lawyers!" Callum McDougal clenched his jaw, eyes dark. "You can't just lock away prime real estate in a trust. It's worthless that way. We had deals in place." Mr. Sage raised a placating hand. "I've worked closely with Wilma for years. Her mental competence was verified well before her condition worsened. The legalities are ironclad. Any attempt to contest the trust would face serious opposition, and she appointed trustees who share her vision." Aaron's stepfather opened his mouth to retort, but Sage pressed on. "Those trustees include Aaron Davis and Miss Mary Crawford once she reaches legal age. Additionally, I remain as legal counsel. Should you attempt eminent domain or forced sale, you'll face a formidable legal barrier. Wilma wanted that made very clear." Silence fell, thick with shock. My pulse raced. Wilma had done it. She'd outmaneuvered them from beyond the grave, ensuring her precious land stayed forever free from profiteers. A slow grin tugged at my lips, replaced instantly by a wave of sadness that she couldn't see this final victory. Aaron's stepfather sputtered, "We'll challenge it in court. We'll claim undue influence. She was clearly coerced by these people." He glared at me and my siblings. Callum muttered something about tightening the screws, but the atmosphere shifted when Aunt Christine stepped forward. "I'll speak in support of Wilma's trust," she said firmly, posture surprisingly regal. "I've known her for decades, and I can attest she was sharp as ever when this was drafted. And I'll happily testify on Davis's behalf." Mary, tears drying on her cheeks, stepped beside Aunt Christine, arms crossed. She locked eyes with Callum. "We're not letting you destroy Wilma's dream. She was family, and we won't stand down." Mr. Sage calmly packed up the documents. "Ladies and gentlemen, the will is now read. Should you wish to contest it, my firm stands ready. But I advise you reconsider. Miss Anderson's instructions are explicit, and any lawsuit will likely be lengthy, expensive, and unsuccessful." A tense minute passed. Aaron's stepfather stormed out, cursing under his breath. Callum McDougal hovered, anger smoldering. He shot me a venomous look. "This isn't over, Crawford. We have connections. Don't get comfortable." I squared my shoulders. "Do what you must. We're not yielding." With a sneer, he followed Aaron's stepfather, leaving us shaken but triumphant. The living room fell silent again, save for the quiet weeping of Mary, who sank onto the couch. Sharon joined her, hugging tight. Lane hovered uncertainly, blinking tears. For them, the final reading symbolized both heartbreak losing Wilma and relief that her home was protected. Allison murmured thanks to Mr. Sage, who offered a kind nod and left, promising further legal guidance if needed. I stepped outside for a moment, letting the chill wind slap my cheeks. The sky threatened snow. I recalled Wilma's last day at the shore, those final words urging me to love Aaron and safeguard Mary's future. My chest constricted with grief and a fierce sense of gratitude. She'd planned meticulously to keep the McDougalls from bulldozing her paradise. After a spell, Aaron slipped onto the porch, sliding an arm through mine. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but there was a calm determination in her posture. "Gran was brilliant," she whispered, gazing at the lake. "She protected everything." I nodded, holding her close. "She did. Now we have to uphold her wishes." She pressed her forehead to my shoulder. "We will. No matter what lawsuits they throw at us, we'll fight." In the distance, I spotted James stepping onto the porch, hands jammed in his pockets. He watched me carefully, then said, "If my father tries something, I can keep you informed. I understand if you don't trust me, but—" I cut him off gently. "I trust Mary, and she trusts you. That's enough for me." He exhaled relief. We shared a brief nod, a tacit alliance sealed by Wilma's memory. We all drifted back inside, forging an uneasy unity. The will read, the storm howling beyond the windows, but Wilma's final plan stood unbreakable. She'd turned her property into a trust so that artists could paint, families could fish, and the shore would remain untouched. The old woman's legacy, a shield no developer could easily tear down. And though heartbreak still weighed on our hearts, we felt her spirit urging us forward. Late that night, while everyone else either left or slept, I wandered Wilma's empty bedroom. The oxygen tank stood in the corner, equipment idly humming. A single painting hung on the wall, a portrait of Wilma's younger self, vibrant and laughing. My throat closed. Slipping the ring she'd given me from my pocket, I clutched it in my palm. She'd wanted me to protect Aaron's future, too. A whisper of wind rattled the window as if Wilma was passing by in the dark. I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I murmured to the silent room. "I won't let you down." Outside, the lake's faint roar echoed the vow. The fight wasn't over lawsuits, threats, maybe more heartbreak loomed. But Wilma had outmaneuvered the opportunists, and we'd stand by her choice. Because in that living testament of her will, she'd shown us that love and loyalty could outlast greed and betrayal. Now it fell to us to see her final wish through to the end. Weeks turned into months after the will uproar. At first, Aaron's stepfather and the McDougalls raged, filing preliminary lawsuits challenging the validity of Wilma's trust. Mr. Sage and Aunt Christine countersued, citing Wilma's competency and thorough legal documents. The case dragged for a while, but the aggressors had no real leverage. Testimonies from Trevor, Allison, and the rest of us confirmed Wilma's clear-minded decisions. Gradually, the suits fizzled, though not without cost. We spent anxious days checking legal updates, bracing for more threats. Meanwhile, life marched on. My plumbing reputation slowly recovered. A few clients recognized the smear campaign as false and recommended me again. The financial strain lessened. Mary, newly 16, blossomed in her art. She sent an entry to a local gallery competition and placed second her swirling abstract depicting Wilma's final hours by the lake. It caused quite a stir, and critics praised her emotional depth. James McDougal, for his part, disavowed his father's bullying. He turned 18 that spring and quietly moved out of the McDougal mansion. He bunked temporarily with a friend, then found a small apartment. Freed from paternal pressure, he and Mary grew closer. Sometimes I'd catch them discussing color theory or quietly holding hands, peace in their eyes. I stayed cautious but supportive. If James walked away from his father's toxic empire, I wouldn't stand in their way. Sharon expanded her short stories into a local zine, flirting with the idea of attending a bigger university. Lane thrived academically, surprising us all by talking about wanting to be a lawyer someday so I can protect people's rights, he said, recalling the fiasco around Wilma's property. Allison, newly certified, took a job at the local clinic full-time, occasionally volunteering for home health calls reminiscent of Wilma's last days. She said it helped her honor Wilma's memory. We all carried the old woman's spirit forward, each in our own way. As for Mom, she vanished again after that final confrontation. A rumor circled that she tried to cozy up to the McDougal father, but he brushed her off. Then she drifted out of town, leaving a terse message on my phone. We're done for good, I guess. My heart still hurt, but I felt more relieved than resentful. Some ties were better cut. One crisp afternoon, I stood outside Wilma's old house, now part of the land trust, admiring how we'd converted her living room into a small community art space. Mary had spearheaded the idea. Local artists or traveling ones could come paint or draw by the lakeshore. The trust's bylaws protected the land from any development. We'd even set up a tiny gallery featuring Wilma's paintings, interspersed with Philip's older works discovered in the attic. Erin strolled up behind me, slipping her hand into mine. She gazed out at the lake, a soft smile on her lips. "It's so calm now," she said, voice reflecting the hush of the waves. I nodded, remembering the chaos of the last year, the heartbreak, the lawsuits, Wilma's passing. "We did it," I murmured. "We kept her place safe. She'd be proud." Erin's eyes glistened. She would. Gran would love seeing people come here to create, to be inspired. Behind us, a group of local teens arrived for an informal art workshop Mary was hosting. James, lugging easels, greeted them warmly. Allison and Trevor showed up too. He'd been invited to see how the place was shaping up. Even Aunt Christine planned to stop by later with refreshments. The once quiet house now bustled with creativity and life, a far cry from the day we carried Wilma's frail form to the shore. Not long after, while Mary instructed the teens, Erin and I wandered down to the old dock. The water lapped gently at the posts, sunlight dancing on the ripples. My heart fluttered. I remembered the vow I'd made when Wilma pressed her rings into my hand that I'd protect this land, and also cherish Erin. I'd mulled over a certain question for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I turned to face her. She looked radiant in the afternoon light, hair catching the sun. My voice wavered. "Erin, I've been thinking about Wilma's words about building a life, safeguarding the future. We've come so far, and My throat closed, but I pressed on. "I love you. I want to stand by you forever." She blinked, tears already forming. I slid a small box from my jacket pocket. Inside lay Philip's wedding band and Wilma's ring repurposed with a simple addition. Philip's ring might be too big for me, but Wilma said to use it. So I had the band adjusted and I kept her ring safe. My voice shook. "Will you marry me?" A trembling laugh escaped her. She looked from the rings to me, eyes brimming with warmth. "Yes," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "1,000 times yes." Relief flooded me. I slipped Wilma's ring onto Erin's finger, fit her surprisingly well. The other ring, resized for me, felt snug around my own. A rush of emotion rose. Gratitude for Wilma's final gift, sorrow she couldn't witness this, and hope for the life we'd build. We embraced, tears mixing with laughter, the wind off the lake swirling around us like Wilma's silent blessing. Mary's delighted shriek from the shore signaled she saw the proposal. Moments later, the entire group from the house came trooping down, cheering or clapping. Sharon whipped out her phone to snap photos, Lane hopped excitedly, James grinned, and Aunt Christine dabbed at her eyes. Even Trevor gave an approving nod. Allison tackled us in a group hug. For once, the air felt sweet, unburdened by lawsuits or heartbreak. We were free to celebrate. Time blurred as we toasted with apple cider in plastic cups. The sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and pink like the day we carried Wilma to the shore. I felt her presence in the quiet hush of the breeze. She'd gotten her wish. The property was safe, her love for Philip honored, and the next generation forging new paths. Betrayal had found a bitter end, replaced by love and loyalty, strong enough to outlast greed. A few months later, after we'd set a wedding date, the trust officially opened Wilma's land for public enjoyment, the Anderson Artists' Sanctuary, we called it. Painters, photographers, and even curious tourists strolled the trails, always mindful of preserving the natural beauty. Mary curated a small exhibit featuring local works, while James quietly supported her, proud of her success. Sharon published a short story in the program brochure, weaving Wilma's story into fictional form. Lane, living up to his vow, practiced debate club with an eye toward law school, ensuring no future developer could easily manipulate unsuspecting owners. And Mom? She never reappeared. Some said she ended up in another state, chasing quick cash or fleeting affairs. But the sting of her betrayal no longer defined us. We had grown beyond it, forging a stronger family out of the wreckage she left behind. That was revenge enough, living a life anchored by love, not spite. One Friday night, as the last visitors left the sanctuary, we gathered inside Wilma's old living room, our living room, really where the record player still sat in the corner. Aunt Christine teased Lane into putting on a vinyl of slow jazz. The melody crackled to life, filling the house with echoes of old times. "No wallflowers," I remembered Wilma saying once. Aaron and I shared a dance on that faded wooden floor, arms wrapped around each other, content in the moment. Sharon pulled James up to his feet, Lane laughed at Aunt Christine's attempts to waltz, and Mary joined in, swirling her paint-smudged skirt. Allison and Trevor observed from the couch, sipping tea and exchanging conspiratorial smiles. I closed my eyes, letting the music carry me. In the swirl of gentle laughter and swaying bodies, I imagined Wilma leaning in a doorway, grinning approvingly, or Philip sketching us from an armchair. The heartbreak in my childhood, my father's tragic end, my mother's betrayal, the manipulative schemes of the McDougals and Aaron's stepfather, none of it vanished. But we'd transcended it. We carried scars, but they no longer bled. We'd turned heartbreak into something enduring. As the record wound down, I led Aaron onto the porch. The lake glimmered under moonlight, calm and endless. She rested her head on my shoulder. "We made it," she whispered. "We kept our family, our home safe." A soft breeze brushed past, stirring memories of Dad and Wilma, two souls gone but not forgotten. The wind off the lake carried both sorrow and hope, whispering that betrayal might cut deep, yet love and loyalty could heal deeper wounds. No heartbreak was final if we chose to fight for something better. And that was Wilma's greatest gift, teaching us that the only real defeat was giving up on each other. I squeezed Aaron's hand, my ring catching a sliver of moonlight. She lifted her gaze, a question shining there. "Where do we go from here?" My heart answered silently. "Anywhere, as long as we stand together." For once, the future felt bright, unclouded by fear. Leaning against the porch rail, I inhaled the crisp air, that quiet tang of pine and lake water. In my mind, I saw Dad's gentle smile, Wilma's mischievous grin, Philip's unseen brushstrokes on a half-finished canvas. We were all part of something bigger, a tapestry of heartbreak and redemption, betrayal and vengeance, culminating in this peaceful hush under the moonlit waves. Aaron slid an arm around my waist. Our family, my siblings, Aunt Christine, James, Trevor, continued dancing inside, faint music drifting through the open door. And I knew at last that we'd found our new dawn. We had Wilma's faith in us, her home entrusted to future dreamers, and each other's unwavering support. Broken ties mended, nightmares conquered, hope shining